My daughter-in-law punched me in the face because the chicken soup was not salty enough. She wiped her hand on a napkin while I wiped the blood from my eye. She told me to cover the bruise with makeup because her wealthy parents were coming for lunch the next day. She told me to smile and act like a grateful servant. But she did not know that the next morning when she walked into the boardroom for the biggest promotion of her life, the man sitting in the chairman's seat would not be a stranger. It would be the old man she beat up in the kitchen. If you have ever been underestimated by the people you sacrificed everything for, hit that like button and subscribe to the channel. Let me know in the comments which city you are listening from. I want to know where my story is being heard. My name is Luther Jefferson. Most people in the culinary world used to know me as Big Lou. I am 73 years old. I have hands that are scarred from hot oil and knife slips, the hands of a man who spent 50 years standing over industrial stoves. I built Jefferson Foods from a single barbecue shack on the south side of Chicago into a franchise empire that spans the Midwest. I have cooked for mayors, for senators, and for hungry kids who didn't have a dime in their pockets. I have signed checks with more zeros than most people see in a lifetime. But in this house, the house I bought but put in my son's name to avoid inheritance taxes later, I am nobody. I am just the old man who sleeps in the guest room. I am the free babysitter, the free maid, and the punching bag for a woman who thinks class is something you can buy at a designer outlet. It was a Tuesday night in Chicago. The wind was howling off the lake, rattling the window panes, a bitter cold that settles in your bones and stays there until May. I was in the kitchen. I love the kitchen. It is the only place where I still feel like myself. I was making a chicken consommé. It is a simple dish if you do not know what you are doing, but a complex one if you do. It requires patience. It requires clarity. I had been skimming the broth for 4 hours, making sure it was as clear as gold glass. I was humming an old Sam Cooke song, trying to keep my spirits up. My son Darnell was in the living room. He is 35 years old. He is a big man, strong, but he has a spine made of jelly. He was sitting on the leather sofa I paid for, playing a video game, wearing headphones that cost $300. He didn't ask if I needed help. He never does. He just waited to be fed. The front door slammed open. The wind rushed in, followed by the clicking of high heels on the hardwood floor. Brittany was home. She is 32. She is the director of marketing at a subsidiary of Jefferson Foods. She does not know it is a subsidiary. She does not know I am the majority shareholder. She thinks she got the job because of her brilliance. She got the job because I made a call 3 years ago, hoping that if she had a career, she would stop spending Darnell's paycheck on handbags. I was wrong. She just spent both paychecks. She walked into the kitchen. She was wearing a camel hair coat and carrying a briefcase that looked heavier than her conscience. She didn't say hello. She didn't look at me. She walked straight to the wine fridge, poured herself a glass of Chardonnay, and leaned against the counter, scrolling through her phone. "Dinner is almost ready, Brittany," I said. My voice is deep gravelly from years of shouting orders in busy kitchens. "I made soup. It is good for a night like this." "Soup," she scoffed, not looking up from her screen. "I work 12 hours a day, Luther. I come home and you offer me hot water. I wanted steak." "Steak is heavy for a Tuesday," I said, keeping my calm. "This is a roasted chicken consommé with root vegetables. It will warm you up." She rolled her eyes. "Just serve it. I am starving. And bring it to the table. I am not eating in the kitchen like the help." I took a deep breath. I ladled the soup into the fine china bowls. The aroma was perfect. Rich, savory, with a hint of thyme. Any chef in this city would have smelled that and known a master was at work. Brittany just smelled disappointment. I carried the tray to the dining room. Darnell paused his game and came to the table, shuffling his feet. He sat down without washing his hands. "Thanks, Pop," he mumbled. At least he said thanks. It was a low bar, but he cleared it. Brittany sat down. She picked up her spoon. She didn't blow on it. She didn't smell it. She just shoved a spoonful into her mouth like she was fueling a car. She stopped chewing. Her face twisted. It was a look of pure, unadulterated disgust. She spit the soup out, not into a napkin. She spit it onto the floor, right onto the hardwood I had polished that morning. "What is this?" she screamed. I stood there holding the tray. "It is soup, Brittany. It is garbage water," she yelled. She stood up her chair, scraping violently against the floor. "It has no salt. It is flavorless. Are you trying to poison me with this bland trash? Are you senile, old man? Did you forget how to cook?" I looked at her. The soup was perfectly seasoned. It was delicate. It wasn't a salt lick. It was refined. but she wouldn't know refinement if it bit her. "It is seasoned correctly," I said, my voice steady. "Your palate is just used to fast food." That was the wrong thing to say. Brittany's face went red. The veins in her neck popped out. She grabbed the bowl. It was full of hot liquid. "You think you are better than me?" she shrieked. "You are a leech. You live in my house. You eat my food, and you dare to insult me." She threw the bowl. It didn't hit my chest. It hit my face. The hot broth scalded my skin instantly. I felt the heat sear my cheek and my right eye. I gasped, bringing my hands up to my face, blinding pain shooting through my nerves. The bowl shattered on the floor behind me. But she wasn't done. She stepped forward. She swung her hand. She was wearing her engagement ring, a 3-carat diamond that I had given Darnell the money to buy because he wanted to propose and didn't have a cent. The back of her hand connected with my left eye. The diamond cut the skin right above the eyebrow. I stumbled back. I hit the counter. I felt a warm trickle of blood run down my eyelid, mixing with the hot soup. My vision blurred in one eye. Brittany stood there breathing hard, her chest heaving. She didn't look horrified. She looked satisfied. "Darnell," I called out. I looked toward the living room. My son was standing there. He had seen it. He had seen his wife throw scalding liquid on his 73-year-old father. He had seen her punch me with a rock on her finger. Darnell looked at me. He looked at the blood on my face. He looked at the mess on the floor. And then he looked at Brittany. He saw the rage in her eyes. He saw the power she held over him. "Babe," Darnell said, his voice soft, placating. "Babe, calm down. You know he gets confused." He looked at me. There was no sympathy in his eyes, only annoyance. Annoyance that I had provoked her. Annoyance that his evening was ruined. "Dad, seriously," Darnell said. "You know she likes it salty. Why do you have to be so difficult? Just cook it the way she likes it. She is tired. She has a big day tomorrow." He turned around and walked back to the couch. He put his headphones back on. I stood in the kitchen alone. The soup was dripping off my chin. The blood was dripping into my eyes, stinging like fire. I didn't say a word. I didn't scream. I didn't cry. I reached for a kitchen towel. I pressed it against the cut on my forehead. The white cloth turned red instantly. I looked at Brittany. She was sitting back down, pouring herself another glass of wine, her hands shaking slightly, but not from regret, from adrenaline. "Clean this mess up," she said, gesturing to the shattered porcelain and the puddle of broth. "And make me a sandwich. I am not eating this slop." I looked at her. Really looked at her. For 3 years I had kept my mouth shut. I had played the part of the poor dependent father because I wanted to be close to my son. I wanted to see if he would eventually become a man. I wanted to see if she would eventually show a heart. I had my answer. I turned to the sink. I wet the towel with cold water. I cleaned my face. The cut was deep. It would need a butterfly bandage, maybe a stitch. The burn on my cheek was already blistering. I walked over to the broom closet. I got the dustpan. I swept up the pieces of the bowl. Brittany watched me, a smirk playing on her lips. She thought she had broken me. She thought this was the moment of total submission. She thought I was a dog that had been kicked and would now obey. She didn't know about the little black circle on top of the refrigerator. It was a camera. A high-definition, wide-angle security camera with audio. I had installed it a month ago, not because I expected this, but because I had noticed cash missing from my wallet and wanted to know who was taking it. It was recording. The little red light was taped over with black electrical tape so no one would notice, but the lens was clear. It saw the soup. It saw the throw. It saw the punch. And it heard Darnell tell me to stop being difficult. I finished cleaning the floor. I didn't make her a sandwich. I walked past her. "Where are you going?" she snapped. I said, "Make me a sandwich." "I am going to bed," I said. My voice was calm, terrifyingly calm. She laughed. "Useless old man. Don't forget my parents are coming tomorrow for lunch. You better not embarrass me." I walked into my small room off the kitchen. I closed the door. I locked it. I went to the mirror. I looked at my face. The bruise was already forming dark and purple around my eye. The cut was jagged. I opened my first aid kit. I cleaned the wound with alcohol. I didn't flinch. I applied the bandage. Then I sat on the edge of the bed. I reached under the mattress and pulled out an iPad. I unlocked it. I opened the app for the security camera. I rewound the footage to 10 minutes ago. I watched it. I watched myself get burned. I watched myself get hit. I watched my son turn his back. I saved the clip. I uploaded it to my private cloud server. Then I emailed a copy to my lawyer, Saul Cohen. I typed a short message. Subject incident at home. Evidence attached. Body Sol. It is time. Activate the protocols. Call an emergency board meeting for tomorrow afternoon at 2 p.m. Mandatory attendance for all executive directors. And check the ownership deeds for the house on Maple Street. I want them ready. I hit send. I put the iPad away. I lay down on the bed staring at the ceiling in the dark. My cheek throbbed, my eye was swelling shut, but for the first time in a long time I wasn't just Luther the old man. I was Big Lou. And the kitchen was closed. Brittany wanted a sandwich. She was going to have to eat humble pie instead, and it was going to be very, very salty. I closed my good eye. Tomorrow was going to be a long day, but it was going to be a good day, because tomorrow the boss was coming back to work. I woke up before the sun, my face throbbing like a drum being beaten inside my skull. My left eye was swollen almost shut, a dark, angry purple bloom spreading across my cheekbone. I looked in the bathroom mirror, tracing the jagged line of the cut above my eyebrow where the diamond had bitten in. It was ugly. It was the face of a man who had been assaulted in his own home by a woman he was paying to house. I washed up carefully, wincing as the water touched the raw skin. I didn't put a bandage on it. I wanted to see it. I wanted to remember exactly how it felt. I walked out to the kitchen. The smell of stale wine and burnt soup still hung faintly in the air, a ghost of last night's violence. I started making coffee the old-fashioned way with a French press. The ritual calmed me. Grind the beans, boil the water, wait, plunge. As I was pouring my first cup, Brittany walked in. She was already dressed for work, wearing a power suit that cost more than my first car. Her hair was perfect, her makeup flawless. She looked like a shark in a skirt. She stopped when she saw my face. For a split second, I saw a flicker of something in her eyes. Not guilt, not remorse, annoyance. "Jesus, Luther," she said, putting her hands on her hips. "You look terrible." "Good morning to you too, Brittany," I said, taking a sip of coffee. She walked over to her purse on the counter and started rummaging through it. She pulled out a small tube of concealer and tossed it at me. It skittered across the granite countertop and stopped next to my coffee cup. "Put that on," she ordered. "My parents are coming for lunch at noon. I don't want them asking questions." I picked up the tube. It was a cheap drugstore brand, not the high-end stuff she used on herself. "You want me to hide it?" I asked. "I want you to not embarrass me," she snapped. "If my mother sees that she's going to start with her whole, 'oh, poor Luther' routine and I don't have the patience for it today, just cover it up and smile. If you so much as frown if you say one word about what happened last night, I swear to God, Luther, you will be sleeping under a bridge tonight." She grabbed a bottle of water from the fridge and cracked it open. Darnell walked in a moment later, scratching his stomach, wearing his pajamas. He looked at me, then looked away quickly, focusing on the coffee pot. "Did you hear me?" Luther Brittany demanded. "I heard you," I said. "Cover it up. Smile. Don't embarrass you." "Good," she said. "Today is a big day for me. I have the presentation for the board this afternoon." She turned to Darnell, her face lighting up with that predatory ambition that always made my stomach turn. "Babe, this is it," she said. "The vice presidency. After today, I'm going to be running the entire Midwest division. The current VP is retiring and the board is voting on his replacement. My presentation is flawless. I'm going to crush it." Darnell yawned. "That's great, babe. You're going to be rich." "We are going to be rich," she corrected him. "And powerful. Once I get this promotion, things are going to change around here. We're going to buy a real house in a real neighborhood. No more of this starter home garbage. Starter home. I had paid $400,000 cash for this house. I had put the deed in Darnell's name as a wedding gift. It was a solid brick bungalow in a good neighborhood. But to her, it was garbage. She checked her watch. "I have to go. I need to prep. Mom and Dad will be here at 12 sharp. Luther, have lunch ready? Something impressive. Dad likes seafood. Make that paella you made last Christmas. And don't screw it up." She grabbed her keys and her briefcase. She stopped at the door and looked back at me one last time. "And fix your face," she said. "You look like a street fighter." She slammed the door behind her. Darnell poured himself a cup of coffee and sat down at the table. He didn't look at me. He scrolled through his phone. "She's stressed, Dad," he mumbled. "You know how she gets." I looked at my son. I looked at the man I had raised to be strong, to be kind, to be honest. And I saw a hollow shell. A man who would let his wife beat his father just to keep the peace. A man who would let her call his home garbage just to keep the money flowing. I picked up the tube of concealer. I looked at it. Yeah, I said. I know how she gets. I put the tube in my pocket. I wasn't going to use it. I walked back to my room. I closed the door. I took out my phone. I had a text from Saul Cohen. Board members are notified. Meeting set for 2 p.m. Agenda emergency review of executive leadership. Do you want me to send the car? I typed back. Yes, have it waiting around the corner at 1:30. And Saul, make sure the projector in the boardroom is working. I have a presentation of my own. I put the phone down. I went to the closet. I pushed aside the old flannel shirts and the worn-out khakis I wore every day to play the part of the poor retiree. In the back, inside a garment bag, was my armor. A navy blue Brioni suit, custom made in Italy, silk lining, the kind of suit that whispers power. Beside it, a pair of polished Oxford shoes that cost more than Darnell's car payments for a year. I ran my hand over the fabric. It felt like coming home. I wasn't going to wear it for lunch. No. For lunch, I would wear my apron. I would wear my bruise. I would play the servant one last time. I would let them spit on me. I would let them mock me. I would let them dig their hole so deep they would never be able to climb out. But at 2 o'clock, Big Lou was coming out to play. I went back to the kitchen. I started prepping the paella. Saffron, chorizo, fresh shrimp, mussels. I chopped the onions with precision. I sautéed the garlic. The smells filled the house rich and complex. Darnell came in sniffing the air. "Smells good, Pop," he said. I didn't answer. I just kept cooking. I was adding the secret ingredient today. Justice. It was going to be a meal they would never forget. And the dessert. The dessert was going to be served cold in a boardroom downtown. I stirred the rice. I watched the steam rise. Brittany wanted to be vice president. She wanted to run the Midwest division. She was about to find out that the only thing she was going to be running was out of the building. I touched the bruise on my face. It throbbed. Good. Let it throb. Let it be a reminder. The lion doesn't concern himself with the opinions of the sheep. But when the sheep bites the lion, the sheep gets eaten. I turned down the heat. I let the paella simmer. Let them come. Let the Sterlings come with their judgments and their sneers. Let Brittany come with her arrogance. I was ready. The table was set, the trap was baited, and the executioner was wearing an apron. At 12 o'clock sharp, a silver Mercedes Maybach pulled into the driveway. It was a beautiful car, gleaming under the pale Chicago sun, a machine worth more than the entire house it was parked in front of. I watched from the kitchen window, my hand instinctively touching the layer of cheap concealer Brittany had forced me to plaster over my swollen eye. It itched. It felt like a mask, heavy and suffocating, but it was nothing compared to the mask I had been wearing for 3 years. The car door opened, and out stepped Roger and Patricia Sterling. They were the kind of people who looked like they had been vacuum sealed into their clothes. Roger was wearing a suit that probably cost $5,000, and Patricia was draped in a fur coat that looked like it had cost the lives of a dozen small animals. They stood on the sidewalk for a moment, staring up at the brick bungalow I had bought with cash for my son. They didn't look at it with pride or appreciation. They looked at it the way a health inspector looks at a cockroach. They looked at it with a sneer that curled their lips just enough to show their teeth. I wiped my hands on my apron. I took a deep breath. The paella was resting on the stove, a vibrant landscape of saffron yellow rice, bright red peppers, and pink shrimp. It smelled like heaven. It smelled like the ocean and the earth and 40 years of culinary mastery. But I knew even before they walked through the door that to them it would just smell like something the help made. Brittany rushed to the door, her heels clicking frantically on the hardwood. She threw it open, her face transforming into a mask of pure, adoring daughterhood. "Mom, Dad," she squealed, embracing them. "You made it!" Roger stepped inside, dusting invisible specks of dirt off his shoulder. "The traffic was horrendous," he grumbled. "I don't know why you insist on living this far out, Brittany. It is practically the wilderness. It is a developing neighborhood, Dad." Brittany said, her voice tight. "It is an investment." "It is small," Patricia said, looking around the living room. Her eyes landed on Darnell, who was standing awkwardly by the sofa trying to look like the man of the house. She didn't smile at him. She just gave him a curt nod. "Hello, Darnell." "Still looking for work," Darnell shuffled his feet. "I have a few leads, Patricia. The market is tough right now." Patricia hummed a sound that conveyed exactly what she thought of the market and Darnell's place in it. Then her eyes found me. I was standing in the doorway of the kitchen holding a pitcher of iced tea. "And there is Luther," she said. Her tone shifted from cold to pitying. "Hello, Luther. Still here, I see." "Hello, Mrs. Sterling," I said. My voice was steady, though my blood was starting to heat up. "Can I take your coats?" She slipped out of her fur without looking at me, letting it drop into my arms as if I were a coat rack. Roger handed me his overcoat with the same dismissive motion. They didn't say thank you. They just walked past me into the dining room. I hung their coats in the closet. I felt the weight of the fur. It was soft, expensive, and reeked of perfume that cost more than my weekly grocery budget. I smoothed the fabric. I wasn't angry. Not yet. I was just taking inventory. I went back to the kitchen and brought out the paella. I set the heavy iron pan in the center of the table on a trivet. The steam rose up carrying the scent of saffron and garlic. Brittany looked at the pan. She frowned. "Paella," she hissed at me under her breath. "I told you to make something impressive. This looks like a casserole." "It is a classic Spanish dish," I whispered back. "Your father likes seafood." She rolled her eyes and turned to her parents with a bright smile. "Luther made paella," she announced. "Isn't that quaint?" Roger peered into the pan. He poked a mussel with his fork. "Rice," he said. "A lot of carbs." Patricia sighed. "Well, we must eat something, I suppose." I served them. I ladled the rice onto their plates, making sure everyone got a fair share of the shrimp and chorizo. I served Darnell. I served Brittany. And finally I put a small portion on a plate for myself. I sat down at the end of the table. "Excuse me," Patricia said, her fork hovering halfway to her mouth. She was looking at me. "Yes?" I asked. "Are you eating with us?" she asked. Her eyebrows were raised so high they almost touched her hairline. "It is my house," I wanted to say. "I cooked the food. I bought the food. But I didn't. I remembered the plan. I remembered the boardroom at 2 o'clock. "There is not enough room in the kitchen," I said softly. "Oh," Patricia said. She looked at Brittany. "I just thought, well, usually in situations like this." "It is fine, Mom," Brittany said quickly, cutting a piece of chorizo with aggressive force. "Let him eat. We don't want him fainting from hunger. It would just be more work for me." They began to eat. I watched them. I watched Roger take a bite, chew slowly, and then make a face like he had just bitten into a lemon. "It is very oily," Roger said. He put his fork down. "It is olive oil," I said. "Extra virgin. It is how the dish is made. It is greasy," Patricia agreed. She pushed a shrimp to the side of her plate. "And spicy. Luther, you know we have sensitive stomachs. Why would you put so much spice in it?" "It is paprika," I said. "It is mild. It burns," Patricia insisted. She reached for her water glass. "Honestly, Brittany, I don't know how you survive on this kind of cooking. It is so heavy, so peasant-like." Brittany glared at me. "I told him," she said. "I told him to keep it simple. But you know how he is. He thinks he is a chef because he used to flip burgers in the 70s. She looked at me with pure venom. "Next time, just buy a salad, Luther. You clearly can't handle complex dishes anymore." I took a bite of my paella. It was perfect. The rice had the perfect socarat, the crispy crust at the bottom of the pan. The flavors were balanced. It was a dish that had won awards. But to them, it was garbage, because I had made it. I ate in silence. I let them talk. They talked about their country club. They talked about their friends' yachts. They talked about their upcoming trip to Tuscany. They dropped names and dollar figures like crumbs on the table. Then the conversation shifted. "So Brittany," Roger said, wiping his mouth with a linen napkin. "Today is the big day." Brittany sat up straighter. She beamed. "Yes, 2 o'clock. I am presenting my strategy for the Midwest expansion. The chairman is going to be there." "We are so proud of you, sweetheart," Patricia said. "Vice President, that is a serious title." "And the salary bump," significant Brittany said. "Enough to finally get us out of here." She gestured around the room, encompassing the walls I had paid for the table we were eating at and me. "We are looking at houses in Lake Forest," she continued. "Real houses, with a yard, and a guest house, maybe." "Lake Forest is lovely," Patricia said. "But what about him?" She didn't say my name. She just pointed her fork at me. Brittany sighed. She took a sip of wine. "That is the problem," she said. "I don't know what to do with him. He is getting worse, Mom. Yesterday he forgot to put salt in the soup. He gets confused. He is becoming a danger in the kitchen. She touched her cheek as if recalling a painful memory, flipping the script of last night's violence so effortlessly it made me dizzy. I tried to talk to him about it, she said, casting a glance at Darnell. But he just gets aggressive. Aggressive, Roger asked, frowning. He looked at me. I was eating my rice head down, shoulders slumped. I looked about as aggressive as a mashed potato. He yells, "Brittany lied." He throws things. I am afraid to leave him alone in the house. Patricia leaned forward, her face twisted into a mask of faux concern. "Brittany, you cannot take him with you to Lake Forest. You are going to be a vice president. You are going to be entertaining clients. You cannot have a confused old man wandering around in an apron. It sends the wrong message." "I know," Brittany said. "But what can I do?" "He is Darnell's father." So Patricia said, "That doesn't mean he is your burden. You have done enough. You have housed him for 3 years. You have fed him. You have clothed him. And how does he repay you? By cooking greasy food and yelling at you?" She looked at me again. Her eyes were cold, dead things. "Why do you keep this old man around?" she asked, as if I wasn't sitting right there. "He is useless, Brittany. He contributes nothing. He is just a drain on your resources. A leech. A leech." The word hung in the air, heavy and ugly. "You should put him in a home," Roger said, picking his teeth. "A state facility. They have places for people like him, people with no money, people who can't contribute." "A state home?" Brittany asked. "Like a ward?" "It is what he deserves," Patricia said. "He didn't save for his retirement. He didn't plan. Why should you pay for his mistakes? You are young. You have a future. He is the past, and a very mediocre past at that." I looked at Darnell. My son. The boy I had taught to catch a ball. The boy I had sat up with when he had the flu. He was sitting there listening to his in-laws discuss throwing his father into a state-run warehouse for the indigent. "Darnell," I said. Darnell looked up. He looked at me, then he looked at Brittany. He saw the expectation in her eyes. He saw the promise of the Lake Forest house, the vice presidency, the money. He looked back at his plate. "Maybe they are right, Pop," he mumbled. "You are getting older. It might be safer for everyone." My heart didn't break. Hearts can only break so many times before they turn to stone. My heart turned into a diamond, hard, unbreakable, sharp. Brittany smiled. It was a cruel, victorious smile. "You are right, Mom," she said. "Soon. As soon as I get this promotion, as soon as the raise comes through, I am going to make the arrangements. We will find a place for him, somewhere cheap, somewhere out of the way, and then we can finally start our real life." She raised her glass. "To the future," she said. "To the vice presidency." To the future, Roger and Patricia echoed, clinking their glasses. Darnell raised his glass too, but he didn't look at anyone. I didn't raise my glass. I stood up. "Where are you going?" Brittany snapped. "We aren't done. Clear the table." "I am going to get dessert," I said. My voice was low, a rumble of thunder in the distance. I walked into the kitchen. My hands were steady. My mind was clear. I opened the fridge. I took out the tray of creme brulee I had made that morning. It was elegant. It was refined. It was the perfect end to a meal. I carried the tray back to the dining room. I set a ramekin in front of each of them. The caramelized sugar top was hard and glassy. I stood behind Brittany. I leaned in close, my mouth near her ear. The smell of her expensive perfume filled my nose, masking the scent of the rot beneath. She stiffened. "What are you doing?" she hissed. "Sit down." I didn't sit. I just whispered loud enough for her to hear, but low enough that it felt like a secret between conspirators. "Good luck this afternoon, Brittany," I said. She turned her head, slightly frowning. "What I hear the new chairman is very particular," I said. "He has a very specific taste. He doesn't like things that lack seasoning. And he really, really hates liars." Brittany looked at me. For a second, the arrogance slipped. She saw the bruise on my eye, the purple mark she had put there. She saw the way I was standing, not stooped, not cowed, but tall. She laughed. A nervous, high-pitched sound. "What do you know about Chairman, old man?" she said. "Just do the dishes." I straightened up. I looked at Roger and Patricia. I looked at Darnell. "Enjoy the dessert," I said. "It is sweet. You are going to need something sweet, because the rest of your day is going to be very bitter." I turned and walked out of the dining room. I walked down the hall to my bedroom. I closed the door. I could hear them laughing in the dining room. They were laughing at the crazy old man. They were laughing at the leech. I reached under my bed. I pulled out the garment bag. I unzipped it. The fabric of the Italian suit felt cool under my fingers. I checked my watch. 12:45. The car would be here in 45 minutes. I started to undress. I took off the stained apron. I took off the flannel shirt. I took off the worn khakis. I wasn't Luther the servant anymore. I wasn't the father of a coward. I put on the white shirt. I buttoned it up to the neck. I tied the silk tie. I stepped into the trousers. I slid my arms into the jacket. It fit like a second skin. I looked in the mirror. The bruise was still there, ugly and dark. I didn't touch it. I didn't try to hide it. It was my war paint. I put on the shoes. I grabbed my briefcase from the back of the closet. I opened the bedroom window. I wasn't going to walk out the front door. I wasn't going to give them the satisfaction of seeing me leave. I climbed out the window into the alleyway behind the house. I walked 2 blocks to the corner where the black Rolls-Royce Phantom was waiting. The driver, a man named Henry, who had been with me for 20 years, opened the door. "Good afternoon, Mr. Jefferson," Henry said. "You look ready for war." I got in. The leather seat was soft. The air was cool. "I am ready, Henry," I said. "Take me to the office." The car pulled away from the curb, gliding silently over the pavement. I looked back toward the bungalow. Brittany was probably finishing her crème brûlée right now. She was probably wiping her mouth, checking her lipstick, getting ready to go and claim her prize. She didn't know that the prize was already gone. She didn't know that the man she had beat, the man she had mocked, the man she was planning to throw away like garbage, was about to become her judge, her jury, and her executioner. She wanted a promotion. She was about to get a lesson in corporate restructuring. And I was the one holding the gavel. I stood in the alleyway, adjusting the cuff of my shirt, the cool breeze from the lake doing little to cool the fire in my veins. The window to my bedroom was closed behind me, a portal to a life I had just shed like a snakeskin. Inside that house, the Sterlings were likely finishing their coffee, perhaps picking at the last of the crème brûlée, their bellies full of my food, and their mouths full of plans to dispose of me. They were comfortable. They were confident. They were oblivious. I walked down the narrow concrete path between the garages, my Italian leather shoes, making a soft, authoritative tap-tap-tap that felt miles away from the shuffle of the old man slippers I wore in the kitchen. 2 blocks away at the corner of Maple and Fifth, a black shadow waited. It was the Phantom. My Phantom. A machine of pure elegance and power, its paint so deep it looked like you could fall into it. It was parked discreetly behind a delivery truck, its engine idling with a purr that was more felt than heard. Henry, my driver for the past 2 decades, stepped out as I approached. He was a man of few words, built like a linebacker, but with the gentle hands of a surgeon. He had been with me since the early days of the franchise expansion, back when I was fighting turf wars with local competitors, and needed someone who could handle a steering wheel and a tire iron with equal skill. He knew everything. He knew about Darnell. He knew about Brittany. He knew about the charade, and for 3 years he had kept my secrets locked away behind his stoic face. "Good afternoon, Mr. Jefferson," Henry said, opening the rear suicide door. "You look ready for war." "I am ready, Henry," I said, sliding into the back seat. The interior smelled of Connolly leather and polished wood, a scent that instantly transported me back to my real life. It was a stark contrast to the smell of stale grease and cheap air freshener in Darnell's bungalow. "Take me to the office," I said. Henry nodded and closed the door with a solid, reassuring thunk. He walked around to the driver's side, got in, and we pulled away from the curb, gliding silently over the pavement. I leaned back into the plush seat, closing my eyes for a moment. The throbbing in my eye had dulled to a steady ache, a constant reminder of the disrespect, the violence, the sheer audacity of what had happened in my own kitchen. I reached into the inside pocket of my jacket and pulled out my iPad Pro. I unlocked it with a thumbprint. The screen lit up, displaying the dashboard of my financial life. It was a complex web of assets, investments, and holdings that spanned the Midwest. Real estate, tech startups, municipal bonds, and of course Jefferson Foods. I tapped on the icon for my personal banking app. The Face ID scanned me, ignoring the bruise, recognizing the man beneath the injury. The numbers populated the screen. Checking $12,450,000, savings $45,000, investment portfolio $180,000. I looked at the figures. They were just numbers, digits on a screen. They couldn't buy me a son who respected me. They couldn't buy me a daughter-in-law with a heart. But today, they were ammunition. I switched apps to the property management portal. I pulled up the file for 100 North Riverside Plaza, the glass tower where Jefferson Foods had its headquarters, the building where Brittany worked, the building where she strutted around like she owned the place, terrorizing interns and sucking up to executives. Owner, Luther Jefferson Holdings, LLC. I smiled. It was a cold, humorless smile. She walked into my building every day. She parked in my garage. She rode my elevators. She sat in an office I paid for, drinking coffee I subsidized, plotting how to throw me into a state home. The irony was so thick I could taste it. I scrolled down to the tenant list. Jefferson Foods occupied floors 30 through 45. The lease was up for renewal next month. I made a mental note to tell Saul Cohen to triple the rent, or maybe just evict them, burn it all down, start over. No, that was emotional thinking. Big Lou didn't make emotional decisions. Big Lou made strategic strikes. I checked my email. Saul had sent the agenda for the emergency board meeting. It was short. Agenda Item 1, Review of Executive Leadership Performance and Ethics. Agenda Item 2, Immediate Restructuring of Midwest Division Marketing. Agenda Item 3, Any Other Business. Simple, clean, lethal. I looked out the tinted window as we merged onto the expressway. The Chicago skyline rose up in the distance, gray and steel against the winter sky. It was a city of broad shoulders, a city that respected strength. I had built my empire here brick by brick, burger by burger. I had started with nothing but a spatula and a dream. I had worked 18-hour days. I had missed birthdays. I had missed holidays. I had sacrificed everything to build something that would last, something that would take care of my family for generations. And what had I gotten for it? I thought about Sarah, my late wife. She had passed 5 years ago, cancer taking her faster than we could fight it. She was the only one who ever really knew me. She was the one who told me years ago that I was making a mistake with Darnell. "You give him too much, Lou," she had said, sitting in her hospital bed, her hand frail in mine. "You shield him from the world. He doesn't know how to fight. He doesn't know how to work. If you keep catching him every time he falls, he will never learn to walk." I hadn't listened. I wanted him to have the life I never had. I wanted him to have it easy. So I paid for college, I paid for his first car, I paid for his wedding, I bought him the house. And in doing so, I had crippled him. I had turned him into a man-child who sat on a couch playing video games while his wife abused his father. Sarah was right. God, she was right. But I couldn't fix Darnell today. Darnell was a project for another time. Today was about Brittany. Brittany, who thought she was the smartest person in the room. Brittany, who thought kindness was weakness. Brittany, who thought a diamond ring gave her the right to throw hot soup. She wanted power. She wanted control. She wanted to be a vice president. She was about to get a promotion to the unemployment line. I tapped on the security camera app again. I needed to see it one more time. I needed to stoke the fire. The footage played on the iPad screen. The kitchen, the soup, the spit, the throw, the punch. I watched my own head snap back. I watched my hand go to my face. I watched the blood, and I watched Darnell turn away. "Babe, calm down. You know he gets confused." Confused. I wasn't confused. I was focused. I was laser focused. I closed the app. I put the iPad away. "Henry," I said, "how far out are we?" 10 minutes, sir," Henry replied, his eyes meeting mine in the rearview mirror. "Traffic is light." "Good," I said. "Pull into the underground garage, the private entrance. I don't want to be seen in the lobby." "Not yet." "Understood." I adjusted my tie. It was a silk jacquard deep burgundy. It looked like dried blood. Fitting. I checked my cufflinks. Gold. Monogrammed. L.J. Luther Jefferson. I was ready. The car descended into the darkness of the parking garage. Henry navigated the turns with smooth precision, bypassing the general parking, the visitor spots, the reserved spots for the executives. He drove all the way to the back to a secluded area blocked by a heavy steel gate. He pressed a remote on his visor. The gate rolled up. We drove into my private bay. There was an elevator there, a private elevator that went straight to the penthouse boardroom. It required a key card and a retinal scan. Only 3 people in the world had access. Me, Saul Cohen, and the head of building security. Henry opened my door. I stepped out. The concrete floor was polished. The air was quiet. I walked to the elevator. I swiped my card. The panel lit up. I leaned in. A red beam scanned my eye. Access granted. Welcome, Mr. Jefferson. The doors slid open. I stepped inside. I watched the numbers climb. 1, 10, 20, 30, 40. With every floor, I felt the old man slipping away. The stoop in my shoulders vanished. The shuffle in my step disappeared. The hesitation in my voice evaporated. Luther the cook was gone. Big Lou was back. The elevator stopped at the 45th floor. The doors opened. I stepped out into a private vestibule. Ahead of me were double mahogany doors. Beyond them lay the boardroom. Beyond them lay Brittany, reviewing her slides, checking her makeup, thinking she had already won. I checked my watch. 1:55. 5 minutes to showtime. I walked to the doors. I could hear voices inside, the low murmur of the board members, the click of heels. I placed my hand on the brass handle. It was cool to the touch. I took a deep breath. I didn't feel nervous. I didn't feel fear. I felt inevitable. I pushed the doors open. It was time to serve the main course. The heavy mahogany doors of the boardroom entrance loomed in front of me, tall and imposing, the kind of doors designed to intimidate anyone who didn't belong on the other side. I stood in the private vestibule on the 45th floor, adjusting the cuffs of my Brioni suit. My heart wasn't racing. It was beating with the slow, heavy rhythm of a war drum. The bruise on my left eye throbbed in time with my pulse, a hot, tight reminder of why I was standing here instead of sitting in my kitchen peeling potatoes. I looked at my reflection in the polished brass handle. The man staring back wasn't the hunched-over retiree who shuffled around Darnell's bungalow trying not to take up space. This man was straight-backed, his shoulders were broad, his eyes were hard. This was Luther Jefferson. This was the man who had stared down union bosses, health inspectors, and competitors who tried to burn his first restaurant to the ground in 1982. Big Lou was back. I turned away from the door and walked over to the side wall. It looked like a panel of expensive walnut wood, but I pressed my thumb against a hidden biometric scanner disguised as a knot in the timber. There was a soft click, and a section of the wall slid silently open, revealing a darkened observation room. This was my secret. When I built this tower 20 years ago, I designed it with eyes. I wanted to know what happened in my company when people thought the boss wasn't watching. I wanted to see who slouched, who stole, and who actually worked. I stepped into the darkness. The room smelled of ozone and cooled air. On the other side of a large one-way mirror was the boardroom. It was empty except for one person. Brittany. She was pacing the length of the 20-foot conference table like a caged tiger, her heels clicking sharply against the floor. She looked immaculate. Her suit was tailored to within an inch of its life, a sharp electric blue that screamed authority. Her hair was pulled back in a severe bun, not a strand out of place. She was holding a laser pointer in one hand and a stack of notes in the other, muttering to herself, rehearsing the lies she was about to sell to the board of directors. I walked closer to the glass. I was 3 feet away from her, separated only by a pane of magic mirrors. I could see the pores on her face. I could see the way her hands shook slightly, not from fear but from adrenaline. She was high on ambition. She was drunk on the proximity to power. The side door of the boardroom opened, and a young woman, an intern named Sarah, scurried in carrying a tray of coffees. She looked terrified. She was balancing 6 cups, trying not to spill a drop. Brittany spun around. She didn't say thank you. She checked her watch. "You are late," she snapped. Her voice was distorted slightly by the glass, but the venom came through clear as a bell. "I told you to have these here 10 minutes ago. Do you want this job, or are you just taking up space?" "I am sorry, Ms. Sterling," the girl stammered. The elevator was slow. "Excuses are for losers," Sarah Brittany hissed. She walked over and inspected the cups. She picked one up, took a sip, and grimaced. "This is lukewarm," she said. She looked at the girl with the same look she had given me the night before, the look of someone deciding whether to discard a piece of trash. "Go heat it up," she ordered, "and if you are not back in 2 minutes, don't bother coming back at all. Just pack your desk." The girl's eyes filled with tears. She grabbed the cup and ran out of the room. I watched Brittany. She didn't even watch the girl leave. She turned back to her reflection in the window, the window that was actually looking right at me. She smoothed her jacket. She checked her teeth. She took out a compact mirror and opened it. She applied a fresh coat of lipstick, red, blood red. She looked at herself and smiled. It was a smile of pure, unadulterated arrogance. "She thinks she owns this room," I whispered to the darkness. "She thinks she owns this building. She thinks she owns me." I looked at my watch, 1:58. The board members would be arriving any second. I saw Saul Cohen walk in first. My old friend. My consigliere. He looked older than the last time I saw him, his hair whiter, but his eyes were just as sharp. He carried a briefcase that I knew contained the deeds to the bungalow, the transfer papers for the subsidiary, and the termination notice for one Brittany Sterling. Saul didn't look at the mirror. He knew I was there. He sat at the right hand of the chairman's seat. He opened his briefcase and laid out a single file folder. Then the others started filing in. The CFO, a man named Miller who was a wizard with numbers but had the personality of a spreadsheet. The VP of operations, a woman named Grace who had started as a line cook in my third restaurant. They took their seats. They were chatting quietly, looking at their agendas, wondering why the retired founder had called an emergency meeting on a Wednesday afternoon. Brittany stood at the head of the table near the projector screen. She was beaming. She nodded at them, shaking hands, playing the part of the rising star. She was charming. She was professional. She was a chameleon. "Good afternoon, everyone," she said, her voice projecting confidence. "Thank you for coming on such short notice. I assume you have all reviewed my proposal for the Midwest expansion. I believe the numbers speak for themselves." She didn't wait for the chairman. She assumed the seat was empty because it was waiting for her. She assumed she was the most important person in the room. Miller cleared his throat. "Ms. Sterling, we are waiting for the chairman." Brittany laughed, a light dismissive sound. "Oh, Arthur. He sent me an email. He got held up in traffic. He told me to go ahead and start. He trusts my vision." A lie. Another effortless lie. The chairman wasn't Arthur. Arthur was the CEO. The chairman was me, and I hadn't sent her an email. I had sent her a tube of concealer. I stepped back from the glass. It was time. I walked out of the observation room. The hidden panel clicked shut behind me. I stood in the vestibule again. I smoothed my tie. I touched the bandage on my forehead one last time. It was throbbing, a hot pulse against my skin. I didn't feel pain. I felt clarity. I remembered the soup hitting my face. I remembered the heat. I remembered the sound of the bowl shattering. "You are a leech. You live in my house." I gripped the brass handle of the double doors. The metal was cool against my palm. Inside, I could hear Brittany's voice rising, gaining momentum. "And that is why we need to cut the dead weight," she was saying. "We need to trim the fat from the operational budget. We have too many legacy employees who are just collecting paychecks. We need to be leaner. We need to be younger. We need to be ruthless." Ruthless. "You want ruthless, Brittany," I thought. "I will show you ruthless." I pushed the doors open. Both of them. They swung wide with a heavy, expensive whoosh of air. The sound in the room died instantly. Brittany froze mid-sentence, her hand gesturing to a graph on the screen. She turned toward the door, annoyance flashing across her face at the interruption. She expected a waiter. She expected a secretary. She expected Arthur. She saw me. But she didn't see Luther the Leech. She didn't see the old man in the stained apron. She saw a man in a $5,000 suit. She saw a man flanked by two security guards who looked like they ate concrete for breakfast. She saw a man walking with the heavy, inevitable stride of ownership. For a second, her brain couldn't process it. It was a glitch in her matrix. The data didn't match. The man who cleaned her floor couldn't be the man walking into her boardroom. Then her eyes dropped to the bruise on my face, the purple swelling, the cut above the eyebrow. Recognition hit her like a physical blow. Her face went slack. The laser pointer dropped from her hand and clattered onto the table, rolling across the mahogany surface like a loose bullet. I didn't look at her. I didn't acknowledge her presence. I walked past her. I walked past the stunned board members. I walked past Saul, who gave me a subtle nod. I walked to the head of the table, the empty chair, the chairman's chair. I pulled it out. The leather creaked. I sat down. I placed my hands on the table. I interlaced my fingers. I looked around the room, making eye contact with every single member of the board. They were silent. They were waiting. Then slowly, deliberately, I turned my head. I looked at Brittany. She was trembling. She was pale as chalk. She looked like she was going to vomit. "Please continue, Mrs. Sterling," I said. My voice was low, rumbling through the acoustic perfection of the room. "You were talking about cutting the dead weight. You were talking about being ruthless." She couldn't speak. Her mouth opened, but no sound came out. She looked at the door, calculating the distance, realizing it was too far. I leaned forward. The light hit the bruise on my face, highlighting the violence of it. "What is the matter?" I asked. "Cat got your tongue? Or is the soup still too bland for your taste?" The board members looked at each other confused. They looked at my face. They looked at her terror. Saul Cohen cleared his throat. He stood up. "Ladies and gentlemen," he said, "for those of you who are new and for those who may have forgotten, I would like to formally introduce the founder, majority shareholder, and chairman of the board of Jefferson Foods, Mr. Luther Jefferson." Brittany made a sound. It was a whimper, a tiny pathetic sound that died in the silence of the room. I kept my eyes locked on hers. "Sit down, Brittany," I said. "We have a lot to discuss, and I brought my own seasoning today." She collapsed into the nearest chair. She didn't sit. She fell. The trap was sprung, the door was locked, and class was in session. I sat in the high-backed leather chair at the head of the boardroom table, my back turned to the room facing the floor-to-ceiling windows that offered a panoramic view of the Chicago skyline. The gray steel of the skyscrapers matched the color of the sky, and the mood in the room behind me was just as heavy. The air conditioning hummed a low, steady drone that sounded like a held breath. I could feel the tension radiating from the 12 people sitting behind me. It was a physical weight pressing against the back of my neck. I didn't need to turn around to know what they were doing. The board members of Jefferson Foods were shifting in their seats, checking their watches, adjusting their ties, trying to make themselves small. They knew something was happening, something seismic. Saul Cohen had done his job well. He had summoned them with a cryptic urgency that promised blood in the water, but they didn't know whose blood it was going to be. They didn't know why the chairman's seat usually empty out. Of respect for my retirement was occupied today, and they certainly didn't know who was sitting in it. The chair was designed for privacy, a fortress of black leather that obscured me completely from their view. All they could see was the back of a navy blue suit jacket and a hand resting on the armrest. A hand with a gold signet ring that some of the older members might have recognized if they looked close enough. But nobody was looking that close. Everyone was looking at the door, waiting for the star of the show, waiting for the woman who thought she was about to be crowned queen. I checked my watch. It was 2 o'clock. Exactly the second hand swept past the 12 with a mechanical precision that pleased me. I like punctuality. It shows respect. It shows discipline. Brittany, however, liked to make an entrance. She liked to make people wait just long enough to remind them that her time was more valuable than theirs. I closed my eyes for a moment, focusing on the throbbing pain in my left eye. The bruise was hot, tight, and angry. It was a living thing, a reminder of the violence that lived beneath her polished exterior. I didn't touch it. I didn't want to soothe it. I wanted to feel it. I wanted the pain to be sharp and fresh. When I looked at her, I wanted to remember exactly what it felt like to be on the receiving end of her contempt, so that I wouldn't feel a shred of mercy when I delivered mine. The heavy double doors opened behind me. I didn't turn. I didn't flinch. I heard the click of her heels on the polished floor, confident, aggressive, rhythmic. It was the sound of a woman who believed the world was a carpet rolled out for her feet. She walked into the room like she owned the building, like she owned the people in it. The scent of her perfume drifted over me, expensive floral cloying. It was the same perfume she had worn yesterday when she threw hot soup in my face. The smell made my stomach turn, but I kept my breathing steady. I kept my eyes on the horizon, watching a storm front roll in. Over Lake Michigan fitting. I thought the storm is here too. "Good afternoon, everyone," Brittany said, her voice projecting to the back of the room, clear and commanding. "Thank you all for coming on such short notice. I know you are busy. But what we are discussing today is the future of this company, and the future waits for no one." She didn't apologize for the emergency meeting. She didn't ask why the chairman was present. She just assumed the floor was hers. She assumed the person in the big chair was Arthur, the CEO, or perhaps a consultant, brought in to rubber stamp her promotion. She didn't even glance at me. She walked straight to the head of the table, standing to my right, setting up her presentation on the podium. She was so focused on her own reflection in the turned-off projector screen that she didn't notice the silence. She didn't notice that Arthur was pale and sweating. She didn't notice that Saul was looking at her with the cold detachment of a mortician. I stayed still. I was a statue. I was a ghost haunting my own company. I listened to the rustle of her papers. I listened to her clear her throat, getting ready to perform. Gentlemen and Grace, she began acknowledging the only other woman in the room with a nod that felt more like a dismissal. I have dedicated the last 5 years of my life to Jefferson Foods. I have breathed this brand. I have bled for these numbers when I took over the marketing department. We were stagnant. We were a legacy brand resting on our laurels, relying on nostalgia and old recipes. But I saw the potential. I saw what we could be if we were willing to trim the fat. Trim the fat. I thought the words echoed in my head. She wasn't talking about costs. She was talking about people. She was talking about the line cooks who had been with me for 30 years, the suppliers who were family friends, the soul of the business. She wanted to turn my life's work into a lean, mean profit machine, stripped of everything that made it special. She wanted to serve numbers, not food. She continued, her voice rising with passion. I have streamlined our supply chain. I have rebranded our image. I have pushed out the dead wood that was holding us back, and the results speak for themselves. Margins are up 12% under my leadership brand. Recognition in the 18 to 34 demographic is at an all-time high. I have done this because I am not afraid to make the hard decisions. I am not afraid to be ruthless when it is required for growth. Ruthless. She used the word like a badge of honor, like a weapon. She was proud of it. She thought ruthlessness was the key to the kingdom. She didn't understand that ruthlessness without heart is just cruelty. She didn't understand that you can't build a table if you are busy chopping down the legs. I have given everything to this company, she said, her voice dropping to a register of practiced humility. I have sacrificed my personal time, my energy, my focus, because I believe in what we are building, and that is why I stand before you today ready to take on the role of Vice President of the Midwest Division. I am ready to lead us into the next era. I am ready to cut the anchors that are dragging us down. Anchors, she meant the traditions, she meant the quality, she meant me. She paused for effect, waiting for the applause, waiting for the nods of approval. But there was only silence, thick, heavy silence. The board members were looking at her, but their eyes were wide, fearful. They were looking past her at the chair, at me. Brittany frowned slightly, sensing the shift in the room. She looked at Arthur. Why aren't you clapping, Arthur? Why do you look like you have seen a ghost? She must have thought. She turned back to the room, her smile faltering just a fraction. Mr. Chairman, she said, addressing the back of my head, her voice tinged with a hint of impatience. I assume you have seen the reports. I assume you agree that my track record is undeniable. I have given my all. Is there any reason why we cannot proceed with the vote? This was it. The moment, the point of no return. She had asked the question, she had invited the judgment. I took a deep breath, filling my lungs with the cool air of the boardroom. I gripped the armrests of the chair, my knuckles pressing against the leather. I felt the power of the position, the weight of the legacy I had built, and the absolute certainty of what I had to do. I didn't speak. Not yet. Slowly, deliberately, I pressed the button on the side of the chair. The hydraulic mechanism hissed softly. I pushed off with my foot, spinning the chair around. The motion was smooth, controlled. I turned 180 degrees, bringing my face into the light, bringing my presence into the room. I stopped facing her. Brittany was standing 5 feet away. She was holding her laser pointer, mid-air, poised to highlight a graph on the screen. Her mouth was open, ready to speak. Her next word, ready to claim her victory. Her eyes met mine. For a second, there was no recognition. She saw an old man in a suit, a black man, black. With gray hair and broad shoulders, she saw a stranger. And then she saw the bruise, the purple and black swelling that closed my left eye, the angry red cut above the brow, the damage she had inflicted with her own hand less than 20 hours ago. The laser pointer fell from her hand. It clattered onto the mahogany table, rolling with a hollow sound that echoed like a gunshot in the silent room. Her face drained of color. It went from a healthy flush of adrenaline to the white of a sheet of paper in a heartbeat. Her eyes bulged. Her breath hitched in her throat. A strangled sound escaped her lips, a gasp that sounded like a dying animal. She staggered back 1 step, her hand flying to her mouth. "Dad," she whispered. The word was barely audible, a ghost of a word. "No," she stammered, shaking her head, her mind rejecting the reality before her. It couldn't be. It was impossible. Luther was at home. Luther was in the kitchen wearing an apron. Luther was the help. Luther was. Nobody. But the man in the chair was. Somebody! The man in the chair was wearing a suit that cost more than her car. The man in the chair was looking at her, not with fear, not with submission, but with the cold, hard stare of a judge. I didn't smile, I didn't frown, I just looked at her. I let her see me, really see me for the first time. I let her see the man she had underestimated, the man she had abused, the man she had called a leech. I leaned forward, resting my elbows on the table, interlacing my fingers. The gold cufflink on my wrist caught the light, flashing the initials L.J. Luther Jefferson. Hello, Brittany. I said, my voice was low, steady rumbling from the chest. It was the voice of Big Lou, the voice that could command a kitchen during a dinner rush, the voice that could silence a room full of executives. You were saying something about dead weight, I believe? She couldn't speak. Her legs gave out. She slumped against the podium, gripping it to stay upright. She looked around the room, looking for help, looking for someone to tell her this was a joke, a prank, a bad dream. She looked at Arthur. Arthur looked down at his papers, avoiding her gaze. She looked at Saul. Saul looked at her with a flat, expressionless stare. She was alone. She was trapped in a room full of people she had tried to impress, and the only person who mattered, the only person with the power to save her or destroy her, was the man she had punched in the face over a bowl of soup. The silence stretched out tight as a piano wire. I waited. I let her sweat. I let the fear soak into her bones. I wanted her to feel what I had felt the night before. The helplessness, the shock, the realization that the person you thought you knew was actually a stranger. But I wasn't a stranger. I was the boss, and the performance review had just begun. The laser pointer rolled across the mahogany table, a small black cylinder making a hollow, rattling sound that seemed to last for an eternity in the dead silence of the room. It finally came to a stop against the leather binder of the chief financial officer. Brittany stood frozen, her hand still suspended in the air where the pointer had been seconds ago. Her mouth was open, her jaw slack, and the color had drained from her face so completely that her expensive foundation looked like a mask of plaster. She blinked once, twice, her eyes darting from my face to the door and back again as if she were trying to wake up from a fever dream. She looked at the bruise on my eye, the purple and yellow swelling that she had put there, and then she looked at the suit I was wearing, the custom Italian wool that whispered of wealth she could only dream of. "Dad," she stammered, her voice cracking, losing all of its boardroom authority in a single breath. "What? What are you doing here? How did you get in?" She looked past me, her eyes wild, searching for a security guard, a secretary, anyone who could restore the world to the way she understood it. "Security!" she shrieked, her voice rising to a pitch that made the board members wince. "Where is security?" "There is an intruder in the boardroom. Someone call the police. This man is... he is disturbed." She pointed a trembling finger at me, trying to regain her footing, trying to frame me as the crazy old man she had spent 3 years painting me to be. "He is my father-in-law," she told the room, her eyes pleading with Arthur, the CEO. "He is senile. He gets confused. He wanders off. I don't know how he got past the lobby, but he is dangerous. Please, someone help me get him out of here." Arthur didn't move. He looked down at his hands, unable to meet her gaze. Saul Cohen sat perfectly still, his face a mask of stone. The other board members looked at me, then at her, then back at me. They saw the resemblance in the authority, the way I sat in the chair, the way I didn't flinch at her screaming. I didn't shout back. I didn't call for security. I just tapped my fingers on the solid oak table. Tap, tap, tap. It was a slow, rhythmic sound like a judge's gavel hitting the bench in slow motion. "Sit down, Brittany," I said again. My voice wasn't loud, but it carried the weight of 50 years of giving orders that were obeyed. She didn't sit. She backed away until she hit the podium behind her. "You can't be here," she whispered, shaking her head. "You are supposed to be at home. You are supposed to be making lunch. You are nobody." I leaned forward, the leather of the chairman's chair creaking softly. I rested my elbows on the table and steepled my fingers, looking her dead in the eye with my good eye. "You are right about one thing, Mrs. Sterling," I said. She blinked, confused by the formal address, confused by the agreement. "About the soup," I continued. "You were right. Last night in my kitchen, when you threw that bowl in my face, you screamed that it lacked salt. You were absolutely correct. I tasted it later, after I wiped the blood off the floor. It was under-seasoned. A rare mistake on my part. I admit that." The room was so quiet you could hear the hum of the hard drives in the server rack in the corner. Brittany was breathing shallow, rapid breaths, her chest heaving beneath her silk blouse. But I said, letting the word hang in the air, "While my soup may have lacked salt, your presentation today lacks something far more critical. Something that no amount of marketing jargon or projected profits can hide." I stood up. I rose slowly, unfolding my frame until I was towering over the table. I buttoned my jacket. "It lacks character, Brittany. It lacks humanity. And it lacks the one thing that this company, my company, was built on. Respect." She stared at me, her mind struggling to process the words. "My company." "No," she breathed. "No, that is impossible. You are a cook. You are broke. Darnell pays for everything. We let you live with us out of charity." "Charity," I repeated. "Is that what you call it? When you take my credit card to buy your purses, when you drive the car I paid for, when you work in the building I own." I picked up the remote control for the media system from the table. It was a sleek silver device. I held it up so she could see it. "You came here today to show us your vision for the future," I said. "You brought slides, you brought graphs, you brought projections. You wanted to show the board who you really are. You wanted to show them what you are capable of." I pointed the remote at the massive high-definition screen behind her, the screen that was currently displaying her title slide, "Brittany Sterling, the Future of Jefferson Foods." "Well, I think that is a fantastic idea," I said. "I think the board deserves to see exactly who you are. They deserve to see the real Brittany Sterling, not the one in the power suit, not the one with the rehearsed speeches, the one who thinks no one is watching." I pressed the button. The screen flickered. The sleek corporate logo disappeared. In its place, a grainy, high-contrast video feed appeared. It was time-stamped yesterday. 7:14 p.m. The angle was high and wide, taken from the top of a refrigerator. It showed a kitchen. It showed my kitchen. The granite countertops were gleaming. The stainless steel appliances shone. And there, in the center of the frame, was Brittany. She wasn't wearing her power suit. She was wearing her camel hair coat, still buttoned up, a glass of wine in one hand. She looked angry. Her face was twisted into a sneer that the high-definition screen captured in brutal detail. And there was me, wearing my old flannel shirt and the stained apron. I was holding a tray. I looked old. I looked tired. The audio kicked in. The sound quality was crisp. "It is garbage water." The voice boomed through the boardroom speakers, shrill and hateful. "It has no salt. It is flavorless. Are you trying to poison me with this bland trash?" The board members gasped. One of the investors put his hand over his mouth. On the screen, the Brittany in the video stood up. She grabbed the bowl. "You think you are better than me? You are a leech. You live in my house," and then the throw. The liquid flew through the air in slow motion on the screen, a wave of scalding broth. It hit the old man in the video. It hit me square in the face. I saw myself recoil. I saw my hands fly up. In the boardroom, the real Brittany let out a strangled cry. "Turn it off!" she screamed, lunging for the remote. "Turn it off right now!" Big Tiny stepped out from the shadows in the corner of the room. He didn't touch her. He just stepped into her path, a wall of muscle in a black suit. She stopped, terrified. The video continued. The bowl shattered on the floor. And then the punch. The camera captured the glint of the diamond ring as her hand connected with my eye. It captured the sound of the impact, a sickening wet thud that echoed off the boardroom walls. I saw myself stumble back. I saw the blood start to run. And then the worst part, the part that made Arthur turn his face away. "Clean this mess up, the video," Brittany snarled, "and make me a sandwich." I paused the video. The image froze on her face. Her lips curled in a snarl, her hand raised, her eyes filled with a hate so pure it was hard to look at. I lowered the remote. I looked at the woman standing in front of me. She was trembling so hard her knees were knocking together. She looked at the screen, then at me, then at the board members. She saw the disgust in their eyes. She saw the horror. That is not real," she screamed, her voice hysterical. "It is a deep fake. He made it up. He is trying to frame me. He hit himself." I laughed. It wasn't a happy laugh. It was the sound of a judge passing a death sentence. "A deepfake," I said. "You think I spent last night editing CGI video? I spent last night bleeding Brittany? I spent last night icing my eye and wondering where I went wrong with my son that he would marry a woman like you. I tossed the remote onto the table. That video was recorded by a security camera I installed 3 weeks ago because cash kept disappearing from my wallet. I thought it was the cleaning lady. Turns out it was my daughter-in-law. I turned to Saul. "Read the file, Saul." Saul Cohen stood up. He adjusted his glasses. He opened the folder in front of him. "Mrs. Sterling," he said, his voice dry and legal. "In addition to the assault and battery we just witnessed, which is a felony in the state of Illinois, given the victim's age, we have conducted a preliminary audit of your department's expenses over the last 12 months. Brittany's eyes went wide. The assault was bad, but this was the kill shot. We found discrepancies. Saul continued. Significant ones. I walked around the table. I stood next to Saul. I picked up a stack of papers from the folder and threw them onto the table. They slid across the polished wood, fanning out like a deck of cards. Credit card statements. Corporate card statements. Explain this, I said. Brittany looked at the papers. Expenses at Louis Vuitton. Expenses at the Four Seasons Spa. Expenses for a flight to Miami for her parents. Those were client gifts, she stammered. Business development. Networking. $40,000 in handbags is not networking, Brittany, I said. It is embezzlement. You used the company card to fund your lifestyle. You used my money to pretend you were rich while you treated the man who signed the checks like a dog. I leaned in close. I wanted her to smell the coffee on my breath. I wanted her to see the stitches in my eyebrow. You wanted to be vice president, I asked softly. You wanted to run the Midwest. She was crying now. Real tears. Tears of a rat that realizes the trap has snapped shut. Dad, please, she sobbed. I can explain. I was under pressure. Darnell, he wasn't bringing in enough money. I did it for us. I did it for the family. Family, I spat the word out. You don't know the meaning of the word. Family doesn't throw soup. Family doesn't steal. Family doesn't look at an old man and see a leech. I stood up straight. I buttoned my jacket. I looked at Arthur. Arthur, I said, what is the company policy on assaulting the chairman of the board? Arthur stood up. He looked pale, but his voice was firm. Immediate termination, Mr. King, and prosecution to the fullest extent of the law. I looked back at Brittany. You heard the man, I said. You are fired. Get out of my building. She didn't move. She stood there paralyzed by the totality of her destruction. Get out! I roared. The sound shook the windows, and then the side door opened again. But it wasn't an intern with coffee. It was 2 officers from the Chicago Police Department. I had called them an hour ago. Ms. Brittany Sterling, one of the officers asked. She looked at them. She looked at me. You called the cops, she whispered. On family, I touched my eye. You broke the law, Brittany, and unlike the soup, the law is very, very salty. The officer stepped forward. One of them pulled a pair of handcuffs from his belt. The metal clicked. Brittany screamed. It was a long, piercing sound of denial. No, you can't. I am an executive. I am a vice president. Not anymore, I said. Now you are just a defendant. They grabbed her arms. They spun her around. They cuffed her. She looked at me one last time as they dragged her toward the door. Her eyes were filled with hate, but also with a terrible realization. She had poked the bear, and the bear had woken up. I watched her go. I watched the doors swing shut behind her. The boardroom was silent. I sat back down in the chairman's chair. I looked at the stunned faces of my board. I am sorry for the interruption, I said, smoothing my tie. Now, who has the quarterly reports? I believe we have some restructuring to do. And for the first time in 3 years, I felt like myself again. Big Lou was back on the line, and the kitchen was finally clean. The video on the screen froze on Brittany's snarling face, her hand raised in a fist, a diamond ring glinting like a weapon. The image was burned into the retina of everyone in the room. For a heartbeat, the only sound was the hum of the projector cooling down. Then the silence shattered. A collective gasp swept through the boardroom, a sound of pure, unadulterated shock. 12 pairs of eyes that had seen market crashes, hostile takeovers, and corporate scandals widened in horror. They weren't looking at a spreadsheet. They weren't looking at a quarterly loss. They were looking at a felony. They were looking at the woman who 5 minutes ago had stood before them preaching about efficiency and ruthlessness, now revealed as a domestic abuser who beat her 73-year-old father-in-law in his own kitchen. Grace, the VP of Operations, covered her mouth with her hand, her face pale. Miller, the CFO, took off his glasses and rubbed his eyes as if trying to erase what he had just seen. Arthur, the CEO, looked like he had been punched in the gut. He stared at Brittany not with professional disappointment, but with visceral disgust. "My God," Grace whispered, her voice trembling. "You hit him. You actually hit him." The murmur grew louder. She threw soup. "Is that blood?" She called him a leech. The whispers swirled around the table, a vortex of judgment that sucked the air out of the room. Brittany stood at the podium, her back pressed against the screen that still displayed her crime. Her chest was heaving, her breath coming in short, ragged gasps. She looked from face to face, searching for an ally, searching for a lifeline, but finding only condemnation. The arrogance that had armored her minutes ago was gone, stripped away layer by layer, leaving behind a terrified, cornered animal. But Brittany Sterling was a fighter, a dirty fighter, and when a cornered animal has no escape, it attacks. "It's a lie!" she shrieked, her voice cracking shrill and desperate. She pointed a shaking finger at the screen. "That video is fake. It's manipulated. It's a deep fake. He did it with a computer. He's trying to frame me." She looked at Arthur, pleading. "Arthur, you know me. You know my work. You know I wouldn't do this. This man is sick. He's obsessed with ruining me because I'm successful. He's jealous. He hit himself. He cut his own head to make me look bad." I sat still in the chairman's chair watching her unravel. I didn't need to speak. Her desperation was speaking for me. Her lies were so frantic, so absurd, they only dug her hole deeper. "A deep fake," Saul Cohen asked, his voice dry and cutting through her hysteria like a knife. "Ms. Sterling, the metadata on that file is time-stamped and geotagged. It was recorded on a closed-circuit security system installed by a licensed professional, and frankly, your acting skills in the video are far too convincing to be CGI." "He's crazy," Brittany yelled, ignoring him, turning her venom on me. "Look at him. He's a senile old cook who thinks he's a tycoon. He probably slipped in the kitchen and made up this whole story to extort money from us. He's the abuser. He's been emotionally abusing my husband for years." I leaned back in my chair. I let her scream. I let her show them exactly who she was. Every word she shouted, every accusation she hurled just proved the truth of the video. This wasn't a professional executive under attack. This was a narcissist losing control. "Are you done?" I asked quietly when she finally paused for breath. My voice wasn't loud, but it carried a weight that silenced her instantly. It was the voice of the man who signed the checks. "Because if you are finished lying about the assault, I said we should probably discuss the theft." Brittany froze. Her eyes darted around the room. Theft. I reached for the thick manila folder Saul had placed in front of me. I opened it slowly, deliberately. The sound of the paper crinkling was loud in the quiet room. I pulled out a stack of stapled documents. They were thick, heavy. I stood up. I walked around the table, my steps slow and measured. I approached her. She shrank back against the podium, terrified I might hit her. But I didn't raise a hand. I raised the evidence. I threw the stack of papers onto the table in front of her. They landed with a heavy thud that made the water glasses shake. They fanned out across the polished wood: credit card statements, expense reports, invoices. "This," I said, my voice cold as ice, "is a forensic audit of the company credit card issued to the marketing department. Your card. Brittany." She looked down at the papers. She didn't want to, but she couldn't help it. "Let's review the business expenses, shall we?" I said, pointing to a highlighted line on the top page. "October 14th, Louis Vuitton, Michigan Avenue, $4,500. Item listed as client gift, but oddly enough there is no client name attached, and I seem to recall seeing a new Neverfull bag on your arm the next day." Brittany swallowed hard. That was for a potential partner. It fell through." "Of course," I said. "And this one November 3rd, the Four Seasons Spa, $600 for a strategy session. Since when does strategy require a hot stone massage and a seaweed wrap?" I was meeting a consultant there," she stammered, sweat beading on her forehead. "And this," I said, pointing to the biggest charge. "December 20th, Delta Airlines. 2 first-class round-trip tickets to Miami. Hotel accommodation at the Fontainebleau, 5 nights. Total cost $8,000. Listed as conference travel. But there were no food industry conferences in Miami in December, Brittany." I checked. I leaned in close. I wanted her to see the stitches in my eyebrow. I wanted her to smell the coffee on my breath. "Who went to Miami, Brittany?" I asked softly. Was it clients? Was it partners? Or was it Roger and Patricia Sterling, your parents, who posted photos of themselves on the beach that very same week? The room gasped again. Using company funds for personal luxury was bad. Using them to fund a family vacation was embezzlement. Brittany's knees buckled. She gripped the edge of the table to keep from falling. Her face was a mask of pure terror. The lie was dead. The charade was over. The numbers didn't lie, and she knew it. I was going to pay it back," she whispered, her voice trembling. "It was a loan, a temporary advance. We were tight. The house. Darnell isn't working. I just needed to bridge the gap." $40,000, I said, my voice rising, filling the room with thunder. "You stole $40,000 from this company, from my company, to buy purses, to send your parents on vacation while you lived in my house rent-free, while you ate my food, while you treated me like a dog." I slammed my hand onto the table. "You didn't need a bridge, Brittany. You needed a conscience." The board members were staring at her with open contempt now. Grace was shaking her head, a look of profound disappointment on her face. Miller was furiously taking notes, calculating the damages. Arthur looked like he wanted to personally throw her out the window. "This isn't just a policy violation," Arthur said, his voice shaking with rage. "This is criminal fraud. You used corporate funds for personal enrichment. You falsified expense reports. You lied to accounting. You lied to me." Brittany looked at him, tears streaming down her face, ruining her perfect makeup. "Arthur, please. I'm good at my job. Look at the numbers. Look at the growth. I made this company money. Surely that counts for something. I can pay it back. Just garnish my wages. Don't ruin me." "You ruined yourself," I said. "You thought you were untouchable. You thought you were smarter than everyone else. You thought the old man in the kitchen was too stupid to notice that the math didn't add up." I walked back to the head of the table. I sat down in the chairman's chair. I looked at her, a broken, sobbing mess in a $5,000 suit she probably bought with stolen money. "You wanted to be vice president," I asked. "You wanted power. Power comes with responsibility, Brittany. Power comes with integrity. You have neither." I turned to Saul. "What are the next steps, counselor?" Saul stood up. He adjusted his glasses. He looked at Brittany with the cold, clinical detachment of an executioner. "Step 1, Saul said. Immediate termination of employment for cause, gross misconduct, theft, and assault. Step 2, he continued. Civil litigation to recover the misappropriated funds plus legal fees and damages. And Step 3, I asked. Saul looked at the door. Step 3 is already here. The side door to the boardroom opened again, but it wasn't an intern. It wasn't security. 2 uniformed officers from the Chicago Police Department walked in. They were big men with grim faces and badges that caught the light. Brittany saw them. She let out a scream that wasn't human. It was the sound of a life shattering. "No!" she shrieked. "No! You called the cops on family! You can't! Dad, please, don't let them take me. I'm sorry. I'm so sorry. I'll do anything. I'll cook. I'll clean. Just don't let them take me." I watched her. I watched her beg. I watched her try to trade her dignity for her freedom. "You aren't family," I said. "Family doesn't steal. Family doesn't hit. Family doesn't look at an old man and see a victim." I pointed at her. "Officers," I said. "That is the woman who assaulted me, and that is the woman who embezzled $40,000 from this corporation. Take her away." The officers moved in. Brittany tried to run, but there was nowhere to go. She backed into the corner, sobbing, pleading, bargaining with a universe that had stopped listening. "Hands behind your back, ma'am," one officer said, spinning her around. The click of the handcuffs was the loudest sound I had ever heard. It was the sound of justice. It was the sound of a debt being paid. They marched her out. She looked back at me one last time. Her eyes were filled with hate, yes, but also with a terrible dawning realization. She had underestimated the cook. And now she was going to get burned. The door closed behind her. Her screams faded down the hallway. The boardroom was silent again. I looked at the stack of papers on the table. I looked at the frozen image on the screen. I felt tired. My eye throbbed. My heart ached for the son who had married this monster. But my hands were steady. I looked at the board. Now, I said, smoothing my tie, about that Midwest expansion strategy. I believe we have a vacancy to fill. The silence in the boardroom was heavy enough to crush a lesser man, but I had carried heavier burdens on my back for 50 years. I watched Brittany crumble her knees, hitting the expensive carpet with a dull thud that echoed the sound of her career imploding. She was looking up at me, her mascara running in black rivers down her cheeks, ruining the face she had spent an hour perfecting for this meeting. She looked small. She looked pathetic. She looked exactly like what she was. A thief who had been caught with her hand in the jar and realized the jar was filled with broken glass. Arthur, the CEO, stood next to me, his face pale. He was a good man. A man I had handpicked to run my empire because he valued integrity over profit, and right now he looked like he wanted to be anywhere else in the world. He looked at the sobbing woman on the floor, then at the stack of incriminating credit card statements, and finally at me waiting for the command. "Do it, Arthur," I said, my voice low and steady. "Do what? Do." "Needs to be done." Arthur cleared his throat. He straightened his tie, trying to regain some semblance of corporate dignity amidst the chaos. "Ms. Sterling," he said, his voice shaking slightly under the weight of the moment. "Effective immediately. Your employment with Jefferson Foods is terminated for cause, specifically gross misconduct, embezzlement of corporate funds, and physical assault on a company officer. You are hereby stripped of all titles, all privileges, and all access to company property." Brittany let out a wail that sounded like a wounded animal. "No," she screamed, scrambling to her feet, her hands reaching out as if to grab the air, as if she could physically pull the words back into Arthur's mouth. "You cannot do this. I am the vice president. I earned this. I built this division. Look at the numbers. Arthur, look at the growth." "The numbers are poisoned, Brittany," I said, cutting through her hysteria. "You built your success on theft. You built your image on my money. You built your career on lies. My house built on sand does not stand when the tide comes in, and the tide is here." She turned to me, her eyes wild, desperate. "Dad, please," she begged, switching tactics in a heartbeat, her arrogance replaced by a frantic pleading that made my stomach turn. "We can fix this. I will pay it back. Darnell and I, we will take out a loan. We will sell the car. Just do not fire me. Do not ruin my reputation." "Your reputation?" I asked, stepping closer to her. "You ruined your reputation the moment you decided to treat people like garbage. You ruined it when you threw hot soup in the face of an old man because you thought he was powerless. You ruined it when you stole from the hand that fed you." I looked at the security guard standing by the door. "Get her out of here," I said. "I do not want her in my building for another second." Brittany backed away, shaking her head. No, I am not leaving. I need to call my lawyer. I have rights. You have the right to remain silent," I said. Just then the main doors to the boardroom opened. Again, but this time it was not a dramatic entrance by a CEO. It was the heavy, inevitable arrival of consequences. 2 men in dark suits walked in, followed by 2 uniformed officers from the Chicago Police Department Economic Crimes Unit. The air in the room changed instantly. It went from corporate tension to criminal reality. The board members pulled back in their chairs, instinctively distancing themselves from the contagion that was Brittany. "Sterling." "Ms. Brittany Sterling," the lead detective asked, his voice flat, professional, bored. He held up a badge. She stared at him, her breath hitching in her throat. "Yes," she whispered. "You are under arrest for grand larceny, embezzlement, and felony assault against a senior citizen," the detective said. Reaching for his belt, he pulled out a pair of steel handcuffs. They caught the light from the window, gleaming with a cold, hard promise. Brittany screamed. It was a high, piercing sound of pure terror. "No, you cannot arrest me here, not in front of everyone. I am an executive." "Take them off. Please take them off." The detective did not hesitate. He spun her around with practiced efficiency, grabbing her wrists and pulling them behind her back. The click of the handcuffs locking into place was the loudest sound I had ever heard. It was the sound of a steel door slamming shut on her future. She thrashed against him. Losing her balance, one of her expensive high heels snapped, sending her stumbling to her knees. Again she looked up at the board members, at the people she had tried to impress, the people she had belittled and bullied for years. "Help me," she cried, looking at Grace, the VP of Operations. "Grace, help me tell them who I am." Grace looked at her with eyes of stone. "You are a thief." "Brittany," she said quietly, And you hit, Big Lou. You deserve this." The officers hauled her up. She was sobbing uncontrollably now, a mess of snot and tears and ruined ambition. The power suit she wore, the armor she had used to intimidate her assistants and belittle her husband now, looked like a costume, a child's dress-up clothes that did not fit the reality of the situation. They began to march her toward the door she dug her heels in, fighting every step, trying to delay the inevitable, trying to wake up from the nightmare she had created for herself. "Wait," I said. The officers stopped. They looked at me, respecting the authority in my voice, even if they did not know who I was. I walked over to her slowly. I stood right in front of her, invading her personal space, just as she had invaded mine the night before. I looked at her tear-stained face. I looked at the fear in her eyes. I looked at the woman who had called me a leech, who had called me useless, who had told me to cover my bruises and smile. I leaned in close enough to smell the expensive perfume that was now mixed with the scent of fear. Sweat, close enough to see the pulse jumping in her neck. She looked at me, waiting, hoping perhaps for a reprieve, hoping that the old man she had manipulated for 3 years would have one last drop of mercy left in his heart. But the well was dry. "Brittany," I whispered, my voice a soft rumble that only she could hear. "Do not worry about dinner tonight." Her eyes widened, confusion mixing with her terror. "In prison," I said, letting a small cold smile touch my lips. "The soup is usually very, very salty." She gasped as if I had slapped her. The realization hit her. The callback to her own cruelty. The poetic justice of the moment. She realized then that I had not just beaten her. I had dismantled her. I had taken her own weapon and used it to cut her throat. I stepped back and nodded to the officers. "Take the trash out," I said. Brittany screamed again, a long, wailing sound of despair as they dragged her through the double doors and into the hallway where her employees, her subordinates, the people she had tormented were watching in stunned silence. I watched the doors swing shut behind her. I watched her disappear from my company, from my life, and from the future of my family. The boardroom was silent, dead silent. 12 of the most powerful business people in Chicago were staring at me, their mouths slightly open, their eyes wide with shock and a newfound respect. I turned back to the table. I adjusted my cuffs. I smoothed the front of my jacket. I felt the bruise on my forehead throb, but it did not hurt anymore. It felt like a trophy. I walked back to the head of the table and sat down in the chairman's chair. I looked at the papers scattered across the mahogany surface, the evidence of her crimes, the proof of her betrayal. Arthur was still standing, looking at the door, looking shaken. "I am sorry you had to see that, Arthur," I said, my voice calm, businesslike again. "It is never pleasant to handle a pest problem." Arthur blinked. He looked at me and swallowed hard. "No, sir. Of course not. You did what had to be done." I looked around the table, making eye contact with each member of the board. I saw fear. Yes, but I also saw relief. They knew the cancer had been cut out. They knew the company was safe. "Now," I said, clasping my hands on the table, "let's get back to business. We have a vacancy in the Midwest Division Marketing Department. I believe we need someone with integrity, someone with vision, and someone who knows how to season a pot of soup properly. Does anyone have any recommendations?" The meeting continued, but the energy had shifted. The air was cleaner, lighter. The shadow of Brittany Sterling had been exorcised. I sat there listening to the financial reports, listening to the projections, but my mind was already moving to the next step. The next target, Darnell. My son was at home right now, probably sitting on the couch waiting for his wife to come home and tell him she was a vice president, waiting for the money to roll in so he could buy a new game console or a new pair of sneakers. He did not know his wife was in a holding cell. He did not know his father was a multimillionaire. He did not know that the house he was sitting in was about to be foreclosed on by a trust he did not understand. He was the next domino. I felt a pang of sadness deep in my chest. He was my boy, my blood. I had wanted to give him the world, but I had given him a hammock instead. I had let him sleep while I worked. I had let him drift while I steered. No more. It was time to wake him up. It was time to shake him until his teeth rattled. It was time to show him that being a man is not about what you are given. It is about what you earn. I checked my watch. 3:30. The police would be booking Brittany right about now. She would be trading her power suit for an orange jumpsuit. She would be making her one phone call. She would call Darnell, and that is when the second act would begin. I signaled to Saul Cohen. He leaned in. "Saul," I said, "get the eviction team ready. I want them at the bungalow by 6 o'clock. "Tonight?" Saul asked, raising an eyebrow. "Tonight," I said. "I want Darnell on the street before the sun goes down. I want him to feel the cold. I want him to be hungry. I want him to understand what it feels like to have nothing, because only then will he understand the value of everything." Saul nodded. Writing it down. "It will be done, Zeke." I looked out the window at the Chicago skyline. The sun was starting to dip, casting long shadows between the buildings. The city was tough. The city was unforgiving, but the city was honest. I was done with lies. I was done with masks. Big Lou was home, and he was cleaning house, starting from the top floor down to the basement. I took a sip of water. It was cool and refreshing. The soup in prison would indeed be salty, I thought, and for the first time in 24 hours the thought of soup did not make me angry. It made me satisfied. Justice is a dish best served cold, but sometimes it is best served with a side of hard truth, and Darnell was about to get a full plate. While I was restructuring the board in a skyscraper downtown, my son Darnell was sitting on the couch in the bungalow. I bought him engaging in his daily ritual of doing absolutely nothing. He was 3 levels deep into a video game. The volume turned up so high it shook the windows, oblivious to the fact that his entire world had already ended. He had a bag of chips on his chest and a soda on the floor, living the life of a teenager. In the body of a 35-year-old man, he was waiting for Brittany to come home. He was waiting for the champagne. He was waiting for the news that she was now a vice president and that they were finally rich enough to leave his embarrassing father behind. He did not know that the only thing coming home to him was a reckoning. I imagine. He paused the game when his phone buzzed. It was probably a notification from his fantasy football league or a reminder to buy milk. He checked it, swiped it away, and then looked up at the television screen. The game console was connected to the big 60-inch smart TV, another gift from me that he accepted without a thank you. But something on the news ticker caught his eye. The broadcast had cut away from the afternoon talk show to a breaking news alert. The banner at the bottom of the screen flashed red. Breaking news executive arrested at Jefferson Foods HQ. Darnell sat up. He dropped the bag of chips crumbs spilling over his shirt. Jefferson Foods. That was Brittany's company. He grabbed the remote and turned up the volume on the news channel, thinking maybe there had been an accident, or maybe this was part of the big announcement. Maybe Brittany was on TV. The news anchor. A woman with a serious face and perfectly coiffed hair looked into the camera. "We are receiving reports of a dramatic scene at the downtown headquarters of Jefferson Foods, one of the largest culinary empires in the Midwest. Sources inside the building confirmed that high-ranking executive Brittany Sterling, the director of marketing, was taken into custody by the Chicago Police Department just moments ago." Darnell blinked. He shook his head as if trying to clear water from his ears. Brittany arrested, that did not make sense. Brittany was the star. Brittany was the shark. She did not get arrested. She got promoted. The anchor continued. "Ms. Sterling is facing charges of grand larceny, embezzlement, and felony assault. The arrest took place inside the boardroom during an emergency meeting. Witnesses say she was led out in handcuffs after evidence was presented by the chairman of the board." Darnell stood up, his knees knocking against the coffee table. He walked closer to the TV, his heart hammering against his ribs. Embezzlement assault. What were they talking about? Brittany did not assault people. She only yelled at waiters and service staff. And me. Then the screen changed. They were showing a clip, not live footage, but a grainy video that looked like it came from a security camera. The news station had blurred the faces, but Darnell knew the layout of the kitchen, he knew the granite countertops, he knew the stainless steel fridge, and he knew the camel hair coat Brittany was wearing. He watched in horror as the woman in the video, the woman he slept next to every night, picked up a bowl and threw it. He watched the hot liquid explode against the face of the old man standing opposite her. He saw the punch, the diamond ring connecting with flesh. He saw the old man stumble back, clutching his eye. Darnell put his hand over his mouth. He felt sick. It was one thing to see it happen live, when he could tell himself it was just an argument, just a bad night. Seeing it on the news stripped away the excuses. It looked like it was a crime. But then the anchor said the words that shattered Darnell's reality completely. "Police sources have identified the victim of the assault as Luther Jefferson." the reclusive founder and chairman of Jefferson Foods, who had been living in disguise with the suspect. Darnell froze. The room seemed to tilt sideways. Luther Jefferson, chairman, founder, disguise. His brain tried to reject the information. Pop was a cook. Pop was a retired nobody who smelled like onions and Old Spice. Pop needed Darnell to read his mail sometimes because he forgot his glasses. Pop did not own a corporation. Pop did not have millions of dollars. But the anchor kept talking. Luther Jefferson, known in the industry as Big Lou, built the company from a single restaurant in the 80s. He is estimated to be worth over $200 million. He had recently stepped back from public life, leading many to believe he had retired. His sudden appearance at the board meeting today has sent shockwaves through the business community. $200 million. Darnell fell back onto the couch. He felt like he couldn't breathe. His father, his own father, was the man who signed the checks. The man Darnell had been asking for. $20 here and there was a multi-millionaire. The man Brittany had called a leech owned the building she worked in. The realization hit him like a physical blow. He remembered every time he had silenced me, every time he had sided with Brittany, every time he had let her insult me, thinking I was a burden. He hadn't just been a bad son. He had been a fool, a colossal blind idiot. He had been sitting on a gold mine and treating the miner like dirt. He grabbed his phone. His hands were shaking so bad he dropped it twice before he could unlock it. He went to his contacts. He found the entry for Pop. He pressed call. It rang once, then it clicked over straight to voicemail. The number you have reached is not accepting calls at this time. He tried again, panic rising in his throat like bile. The number you have reached is not accepting calls. Blocked. I had blocked him. I had cut the cord. Darnell stared at the phone, his eyes wide with terror. He wasn't just cut off from communication. He was cut off from the source. He realized with a jolt of cold fear that every bill in his life, every credit, every card payment, every mortgage installment was tied to me or to Brittany, and Brittany was in jail and I was gone. He needed help. He needed someone to tell him what to do. He couldn't call Brittany. He couldn't call me. He scrolled through his contacts until he found the Sterlings. Roger and Patricia, Brittany's parents. Surely they would know what to do. Surely they had money. Surely they could fix this. They were rich. They had a Maybach. They wore furs. He dialed Patricia's number. It rang for a long time. Darnell paced the living room, stepping on the potato chips he had spilled earlier, kicking the controller out of the way. Answer. Pick up, pick up. Finally the line connected. Patricia. Darnell gasped. Darnell. Here, have you seen the news? Have you seen what happened? He expected her to be crying about Brittany. He expected her to be screaming about lawyers and bail money. Instead, he heard a woman on the verge of a nervous breakdown, but not about her daughter. Darnell? Patricia shrieked, her voice so high and shrill it hurt his ear. What is going on with the cards? I am at the spa. Darnell, I just had a $300 treatment and the card was declined. The platinum card. Brittany gave me, she said it had no limit. Darnell stopped pacing. What the card? It is dead, she yelled. Declined. Invalid. I tried the other one, the one for the gas. It is dead too. Roger is at the golf club. He just called me screaming because they cut up his card at the pro shop. Darnell. They cut it up with scissors in front of his friends. Darnell felt the blood drain from his face. The cards, the supplementary cards Brittany had given her parents, telling them it was a perk of her executive package. Those cards were linked to the corporate account linked to the slush fund she had been embezzling from Patricia. Listen, Brittany has been arrested. I do not care if she has been arrested. Patricia screamed. I care that I am standing at the front desk of the Elizabeth Arden Spa looking like a pauper. Fix it, Darnell. Call the bank. Get the money. Turn the cards back on. They are gone. Patricia, Darnell whispered, the realization washing over him. The money. It wasn't Brittany's. It was the company's. It was my dad's, and he took it back. He took it all back. What do you mean, he took it back? Patricia demanded, her voice dropping to a dangerous hiss. Who took it back? My dad, Darnell said, his voice trembling. Luther, the old man, the leech. Don't be stupid, Darnell. Your father is a nobody. He cooks rice. No, Darnell said, laughing, a hysterical high-pitched sound that bubbled up from his chest. No, Patricia. He isn't. He is the chairman. He owns the company. He owns everything. He is worth $200 million, and we treated him like a dog. There was silence on the other end of the line. Total, stunned silence. "You are lying," Patricia whispered, but her voice wavered. She was remembering the lunch. She was remembering the way I had looked at her, the way I had whispered to Brittany. She was connecting the dots just like Darnell had. I saw it on saw. "The news," Darnell said, tears streaming down his face. "Now he fired her, Patricia. He had her arrested and he shut off the money. We are broke. We are worse than broke. We are done." Patricia didn't offer help. She didn't ask if Darnell was okay. She didn't ask about her daughter in a holding cell. "You useless idiot," she hissed. "You and that daughter of mine, you told us you had it handled. You told us we were set for life. How could you let this happen? How could you not know who your own father was?" "I didn't know," Darnell sobbed. "I swear, do not call us again," Patricia snapped. "Roger is going to have a heart attack. We have to figure out how to pay these bills without you. Do not drag us down with you." Click. The line went dead. Darnell lowered the phone. He looked around the living room. The leather sofa seemed to shrink. The big TV seemed to mock him. The house, the car, the clothes, everything he had. Everything he thought he owned it all belonged to the man he had watched get beaten the night before. He was alone. Brittany was in jail. His in-laws had abandoned him and his father. The only person who had ever truly loved him had blocked his number. He walked to the window. He looked out at the driveway. His car, Brittany's company car, a luxury SUV, was parked there. But as he watched a tow truck pulled up to the curb, it was a big yellow truck with flashing lights. A man jumped out carrying a clipboard and a set of tools. Darnell watched as the man hooked up the SUV. He watched as the car was lifted into the air. He watched as it was towed away. It was a company car, and the company wanted it back. Darnell slid down the wall until he was sitting on the floor amidst the chip crumbs and the silence. He pulled his knees to his chest. He buried his face in his arms. "Pop," he whispered to the empty house. "Pop, please pick up." But nobody answered. The only sound was the wind rattling the windows, the same wind that had blown through the kitchen the night before. When he had chosen his side, he had chosen the wrong side. And now the house was getting cold and the sun was going down, and for the first time in his life, Darnell realized he didn't know how to turn on the heat because his father had always done it for him. I sat in the back of the Phantom watching the city of Chicago blur past the tinted windows like a stream of molten gold and steel. The adrenaline from the boardroom was fading, leaving behind a deep, bone-weary exhaustion that felt like I had just worked a double shift on the line during Thanksgiving. My eye throbbed, the pain sinking with the rhythm of the tires on the asphalt, but I did not touch it. The pain was good. The pain kept me sharp. The pain reminded me that while the battle was won, the war was far from over. Henry caught my eye in the rearview mirror. "Where to, Mr. Jefferson? Back to the bungalow." I looked out the window. I thought about that house. I thought about the small room off the kitchen where I slept on a twin mattress. I thought about the smell of Darnell's stale chip smoke and Brittany's overpowering perfume. I thought about the way the floorboards creaked when I tried to walk softly so I would not disturb the people who treated me like a ghost in my own property. "No, Henry," I said, my voice low. "Take me home." Henry nodded. He knew what home meant. It did not mean the brick house in the suburbs. It meant the penthouse at the top of the Lake Point Tower, the only building in Chicago that sits east of Lake Shore Drive, standing alone against the vast darkness of Lake Michigan. We drove in silence. The car glided into the private garage. I took the elevator up. This was a different elevator than the one at the office. It smelled of cedar and silence. It opened directly into my foyer. I stepped out. The lights flickered on automatically, sensing my presence. The floors were marble, cold and hard. The walls were lined with art I had collected over 40 years, paintings that cost more than Brittany would earn in 10 lifetimes. It was a museum. It was a fortress. But as I walked into the massive living room with its floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the black water of the lake, I realized what it really was. It was a mausoleum. It was empty, quiet, too quiet. I walked to the bar. I poured myself a glass of 25-year-old scotch. I did not add ice. I wanted the burn. I walked to the window and looked out at the city lights. Somewhere down there in the grid of streets and houses, my son was sitting in the dark waiting for a savior who was not coming. I took a sip of the scotch. It warmed my chest, but it could not thaw the chill in my heart. I turned away from the view and looked at the fireplace. On the mantel there was a single photograph in a silver frame. It was Sarah, my wife, my partner, the only person who had ever called me Luther without wanting something. She was laughing in the photo, her head thrown back, her eyes sparkling. We were young then, poor but hungry. We were building the empire together. She had died 5 years ago, leaving me with all the money in the world and no one to share it with. I walked over to the photo. I touched the glass. "I am sorry, Sarah," I whispered. I remembered the arguments we used to have about Darnell. They were the only times we ever really fought. I wanted to give him everything. I wanted to give him the toys I never had, the clothes I never wore, the ease I never felt. I wanted to protect him from the harshness of the world that had calloused my hands and hardened my soul. But Sarah, she saw things differently. She was softer than me in her heart, but harder in her wisdom. "You are crippling him, Lou," she would say, standing in the kitchen of our first real house, her hands covered in flour. "You are taking away his struggle. A man who never carries a load will break under the weight of a feather. You think you are loving him, but you are weakening him. You are turning him into a pet." I had argued. I had told her she was being too hard. I told her I worked this hard so he would not have to. I told her that was the American dream, but she was right. God, she was right. I looked at the photo. I looked at her eyes. "I made him this way, Sarah," I said to the empty room. "I bought him the car. I bought him the house. I paid his bills. I let him think that money was like rain, something that just fell from the sky whenever he opened his hand. I taught him that he did not have to work because his father worked enough for both of them. And because of that, he married a woman who saw him as a mark. He married a predator because he did not have the instincts to spot a wolf. He let her beat me. He let her humiliate me because he was too weak to stand up, because he was afraid that if he stood up, the gravity of the real world would crush him. I had created a monster. Not a scary monster, but a pathetic one. A man-child who sat on a couch while his father bled. I took another drink. The scotch tasted like regret. But Sarah also used to say something else. She used to say that it is never too late to fix a recipe as long as the fire is still burning. You can balance the salt. You can add acid. You can save the dish if you have the courage to taste it and admit it is wrong. I had tasted the dish last night. It was bitter. It was rotten. And now I had to throw it out and start over. I could not save Darnell by giving him more. I had tried that for 35 years. It had failed. The only way to save him now was to take it all away. The only way to make him a man was to treat him like one. And men do not get free rides. Men do not live in houses they did not earn. Men do not let their fathers get abused. I had to break him to build him. I turned away from the photo. I set the glass down on the mantel. The decision settled in my gut, heavy and cold like a stone, but it was the right stone. It was the foundation. I reached into my pocket and pulled out my phone. It was late, but I knew Saul Cohen would be awake. He was like me. He did not sleep when there was work to be done. I dialed his number. He answered on the first ring. "Zeke, are you all right?" "I am fine, Saul," I said. "I am home." "Good. You should rest." "Today was a war. The war is not over," I said. "We took the general. Now we have to take the castle." Saul paused. "What do you mean, the house, Saul?" "The bungalow. The one Darnell is sitting in right now. It is in his name, Zeke." "Technically." "No," I said. "It is not. Remember the trust structure we set up 5 years ago when Sarah got sick? We wanted to protect the assets from estate taxes. The deed is held by the Jefferson Family Trust. Darnell is a beneficiary, but he is not the trustee. I am the trustee. And the trust has a clause. Clause 14. Saul said, his voice sharp. The morality clause. If a beneficiary engages in conduct that endangers the family reputation or shows gross ingratitude or incompetence, the trustee has the right to revoke privileges immediately. Exactly, I said. Darnell watched his wife assault the trustee of the estate. He did not intervene. He did not call the police. He aided and abetted a felony. That is gross misconduct. It is Saul agreed. It is grounds for immediate revocation. I want the house back, Saul. When Saul asked, "Tonight," I said. "Tonight, Zeke." It is almost 6 o'clock. It is getting dark. Where will he go? I looked out at the city. Millions of lights. Millions of people fighting to survive. Millions of people who did not have a father with a safety net. I do not know, I said, and that is the point. He needs to figure it out. He needs to feel the cold. He needs to be hungry. He needs to know what it feels like when the safety net is gone and there is nothing below you but concrete. It will be brutal, Saul warned. It is necessary, I replied. If I let him stay there tonight, he will think he survived. He will think he can ride this out. He will think that because Brittany is gone, he is safe. He will not change. He will just wait for the next check. I have to cut the cord, Saul. I have to cut it now while the wound is fresh. Okay, Saul said. I will call the eviction team. I have a private security detail on retainer for asset recovery. They can be there in an hour. Do you want the police involved? No police, I said. Just the team. Have them pack his things. Everything. Put it on the curb. Change the locks. Board up the windows if you have to. Make sure he knows he cannot get back in. And if he calls you, he won't be able to, I said. I already blocked him. There was a silence on the line. A respectful silence. You are doing a hard thing, Zeke Saul said softly. Sarah would be proud. I looked at the photo on the mantel. The smiling woman who had warned me. The woman who had loved our son enough to want him to struggle. I hope so, Saul, I said. I really hope so. Execute the order. I hung up the phone. I picked up my glass and finished the scotch. I walked to the window and looked down at the streets. Somewhere down there, a team of men was getting into a van. They were going to drive to the house I bought. They were going to throw my son out into the night. It broke my heart. It truly did. But a broken heart is a small price to pay for a saved soul. I turned off the lights in the living room. I sat in the dark watching the city breathe. Good night, Darnell, I whispered. Welcome to the real world. I watched the feed from the security camera in the living room of the bungalow, the image crisp on my iPad screen. It was like watching a reality show where the contestants didn't know they had already been voted off the island. Darnell was pacing back and forth in the dark, wrapped in a blanket, the blue light of his phone illuminating his terrified face. He had been calling me every 5 minutes for the last hour. I hadn't answered once. Suddenly, headlights swept across the front window, blindingly bright against the dark interior. Darnell jumped, dropping his phone. He ran to the window, hope written all over his face. He thought it was me. He thought Daddy was coming to fix it. But it wasn't me. A silver Mercedes screeched into the driveway. It was Roger and Patricia Sterling. They didn't wait to be invited. They burst through the front door carrying Louis Vuitton weekend bags and looking like they had been chased by wolves. Darnell! Patricia shrieked, her voice vibrating through the camera's microphone. Fix this! Fix it now! They cut the cards. They declined the transaction at the spa. I had to leave my driver's license as collateral. Do you know how humiliating that is? Roger stormed in behind her, throwing his golf clubs onto my hardwood floor. This is a disaster. The club manager revoked my membership an hour ago. He said the corporate sponsor pulled the funding. What the hell is going on? I don't know, Darnell stammered, backing away from his in-laws. Dad, Luther, he owns everything. He fired Brittany. He shut it all down. Well, call him, Patricia yelled. Tell him to turn it back on. We need a place to stay. The locks on our condo. They aren't working. We are staying here until this is sorted out. They started unpacking. They started taking over the living room, throwing their coats on the furniture, acting like refugees who were angry at the quality of the shelter. They were settling in to leech off the last vein of blood they thought I had left. But they didn't hear the heavy diesel engine rumbling up the street. A black van pulled up behind the Mercedes. It had no logo. No markings, just dark-tinted windows and a grill guard that looked like it could punch through a brick wall. 4 men got out. They were dressed in tactical black cargo pants and heavy jackets. They weren't police. They were private security, the kind you hire when you want a problem removed, not discussed. They walked up the path. They didn't knock. The lead man, a giant with a shaved head, inserted a key into the front door lock, a master key I had given Saul. He turned it. The deadbolt clicked back with a sound like a gunshot. The door swung open. The wind howled in carrying snowflakes that melted on the floor. Darnell spun around. Roger dropped a bottle of scotch he had found in the cabinet. Patricia screamed. Who are you? Darnell shouted, trying to muster some of the arrogance he usually borrowed from Brittany. Get out. This is private property. This is my house. The lead guard didn't even look at him. He stepped into the room, his boots heavy on the wood. Clear the premises, he said to his team. His voice was flat bored. The other 3 men moved with military precision. They didn't argue. They didn't explain. They just started grabbing things. One of them picked up Darnell's gaming console, ripped the cords out of the wall, and walked to the front door. He didn't set it down gently, he tossed it into the snow. Another grabbed Patricia's fur coat from the back of the sofa. "Hey, that is mink," she screeched, lunging for it. The guard sidestepped her effortlessly and threw the coat out onto the wet lawn. "Stop it," Darnell yelled, rushing at the lead guard. He grabbed the man's arm. "I said stop. This is my house. I have the deed. My father bought this for me. You are breaking the law." The guard stopped. He looked down at Darnell's hand on his arm. He looked at Darnell. He didn't shove him. He just stood there, a wall of immovable force. Then a figure stepped out from behind the wall of muscle. It was a man in a long wool coat holding a leather briefcase. It wasn't Saul. It was one of his associates, a sharp-faced lawyer named Mr. Vance, who specialized in asset recovery. I had met him once. He had eyes like a shark. "Actually, Mr. Jefferson," Vance said, his voice cutting through the chaos. "You don't." Darnell froze. "What?" Vance opened the briefcase. He pulled out a document stamped with the seal of the Cook County Recorder of Deeds. "The property located at 452 Maple Avenue is not owned by Darnell Jefferson," Vance read calmly. "It is owned by the Jefferson Family Irrevocable Trust. You are merely a named beneficiary with revocable residency privileges." "Trust?" Darnell blinked. "But Dad said it was mine." "He said it was your home," Vance corrected. "He never said it was your asset, and like all trusts, this one has conditions." Vance flipped a page. He pointed to a paragraph highlighted in yellow. Clause 14, Section B. "The Morality and Conduct Clause," Vance read. "The trustee reserves the right to immediately revoke all privileges, including housing and stipends, if the beneficiary engages in, facilitates, or is complicit in any act of physical abuse, gross negligence, or moral turpitude directed at the grantor." Vance looked up. He looked Darnell right in the eye. "The grantor is your father, Luther Jefferson, and last night, at approximately 7 p.m., you witnessed a physical assault on the grantor. You did not intervene. You did not render aid. You did not contact the authorities. Instead, you instructed the victim to stop being difficult." Darnell's face went white. He remembered. He remembered the soup. He remembered the blood. He remembered turning his back. But that was Brittany," he stammered, tears welling up in his eyes. "She hit him. Not me. I didn't want to fight. I didn't do anything." "Exactly," Vance said. "You did nothing. That is gross negligence. You watched your father bleed and you asked for dinner. That is moral turpitude. You broke the contract, Darnell." Vance snapped the folder shut. "The trust has invoked the immediate termination clause. You are trespassing. You have 5 minutes to vacate the premises before these gentlemen remove you forcibly." "You can't do this," Roger Sterling shouted, stepping forward, his face red. "We have rights. We are guests." "You are squatters," Vance said, not even looking at him. "And since you are not named in the lease, you have 0 minutes. Vance nodded to the guards. "Remove them." The guards moved. They didn't use weapons. They used leverage. 2 of them grabbed Roger by the arms. He kicked and sputtered, looking ridiculous as they marched him to the door and tossed him out like a drunk at a bar. Patricia screamed as another guard took her arm. "Do not touch me. I will sue you. I will own you." "Ma'am, you don't even own the shoes you are wearing right now," the guard said, escorting her firmly to the porch and locking her out. Then they turned to Darnell. My son stood in the middle of the room. He looked at the empty spot where his TV used to be. He looked at the kitchen where he had watched me get beaten. He looked at the camera on the fridge. "Pop," he whispered. "Pop, are you watching, please? It is cold. Please don't." I watched him. My finger hovered over the microphone button on the iPad. I could speak to him. I could tell the guards to stop. I could give him one more chance. But I remembered the blood in my eye. I remembered the disrespect. I didn't press the button. The lead guard grabbed Darnell by the shoulder. "Time to go, son." Darnell didn't fight. He slumped. He let them lead him to the door. He stepped out onto the porch. The guard slammed the heavy front door. I heard the deadbolt slide home. The electronic lock beeped as they changed the code. I switched the camera feed to the exterior view. Darnell was standing in the snow. He was wearing socks. No shoes. Just socks. Roger and Patricia were screaming at him, hitting him with her handbag, blaming him for everything. "You idiot! You told us you owned it. You told us we were safe." Darnell just stood there shivering violently, snowflakes catching in his hair. He looked at the closed door. He looked at the dark windows. He realized then that the bank wasn't just closed. The bank had been demolished. The security team got back in their van. Vance got into his car. They drove away, leaving the three of them standing in the freezing wind with nothing but a pile of garbage bags and their own regrets. I turned off the iPad. I sat in the silence of my penthouse. The fire in the fireplace was warm. The whiskey in my glass was smooth. But I didn't feel happy. I felt a deep, aching hollowness. It had to be done. I knew that. But watching your own child get thrown out into the cold, that is a pain that no amount of money can soothe. But then I touched the bandage on my forehead. It was still tender. He watched me bleed, I reminded myself. He watched me bleed and asked for salt. I took a sip of the whiskey. Let the cold teach him what I couldn't. Let the snow teach him what warmth is worth. I went to bed, but I left the curtains open. I wanted to see the city lights. I wanted to see the world that I had conquered and the world that my son was just now entering for the very first time. I sat in my penthouse living room, the fire crackling in the hearth, warming my feet, but my eyes were fixed on the cold blue glow of the iPad screen. The security feed from the exterior camera of the bungalow was high definition, crisp enough to see the steam rising from Darnell's breath in the freezing Chicago air. The wind was whipping the snow into swirls around the driveway, coating the black plastic trash bags that held the remains of my son's life in a layer of white frost. It was a silent movie, a tragedy playing out in real time. And I was the only audience member. Darnell stood shivering in his socks, his feet sinking into the slush. He looked small, smaller than I had ever seen him. He was looking at Roger and Patricia Sterling, expecting them to take charge, expecting them to fix it, because that is what he had been taught his whole life, that someone else would always fix it. But the Sterlings were not fixers. They were leeches. And when the host body dies, the leeches detach. I watched as Patricia scrambled to her feet, brushing wet snow off her designer pants. She looked at the locked house, then she looked at Darnell, her face twisted into a mask of pure venom. I could not hear every word over the wind on the microphone, but I could hear the pitch, the shrill screech of a woman who had just realized her meal ticket had bounced. "You idiot!" she screamed, pointing a manicured finger in Darnell's face. "You told us this was yours. You told us the old man was senile. You told us we were set for life." Darnell flinched, holding his hands up as if to ward off a blow. "I didn't know, Patricia," he stammered, his voice tinny through the speaker. "I thought he put the deed in my name. He said it was my house." "He lied, you moron," Roger shouted, stepping in. He grabbed Darnell by the lapels of his thin jacket, shaking him. "Your father played you, and you were too stupid to see it. You let us walk into a trap. We walked into it together." Darnell pleaded. "We are family. Roger, we are in this together. Where are we?" "Going to go." Roger laughed. It was a cruel barking sound that hung in the cold air. "We?" he asked, pushing Darnell away. "There is no we anymore. Darnell, you were only useful when you had access to the money, without the house, without the company, without the inheritance. What are you?" "I am your son-in-law," Darnell whispered. "You are an unemployed loser with a criminal wife," Roger spat. "You are an anchor, Darnell, and we are cutting the rope." I saw Roger pull out his phone. He was tapping furiously, probably calling the only luxury car service that still had his credit card on file, or maybe a regular taxi using the last of his hidden cash. The Sterlings always had a stash. They were survivors in the worst sense of the word. Darnell stood there, arms wrapped around himself, shaking violently from the cold and the shock. He watched them. He watched the people he had tried so hard to impress, the people he had let insult his father, turning on him like wolves. "But what about Brittany?" he asked, his voice breaking. "She is in jail. We have to help her." "She is your wife," Patricia snapped. "She is your problem. You figure it out. We are going to a hotel, a cheap one thanks to you, and we are going to call a lawyer to see if we can sue you for fraud." "Sue me?" Darnell asked, incredulous. "You misrepresented your assets," Roger said, smoothing his coat. "You defrauded us of our time and our reputation." A pair of headlights swept down the street. A yellow taxi slowed down and pulled up to the curb. It was a lifeline, a way out of the cold. Roger grabbed two of the trash bags, the ones that looked like they held clothes. He threw them into the trunk. Patricia grabbed her handbag and scurried into the back seat. Darnell took a step toward the car. "Wait, please, just drop me off somewhere. Anywhere. It is freezing. Roger stood by the open back door. He looked at Darnell, he looked at his son-in-law, the man who had bought him dinners, the man who had let him live in my house, rent-free. "No room," Roger said coldly. "But I have no shoes," Darnell cried, looking down at his soaked socks. "I have nothing. Should have thought about that before you let your father outsmart you," Roger said. He slammed the door. The taxi didn't wait. The driver didn't care about the drama. He just wanted the meter running. The car pulled away, tires spinning in the slush for a second before gripping the pavement and speeding off into the night. Leaving Darnell alone, I watched my son on the screen. He stood in the middle of the driveway, illuminated by the harsh yellow light of the street lamp. The snow was falling harder now, burying the trash bags, burying the lawn I had mowed for him, burying the lies. He turned in a slow circle. He looked at the street where the taxi had vanished. He looked at the house where the windows were dark and the locks were changed. He looked at the sky. He reached into his pocket. He pulled out his wallet. He opened it frantically, searching for something, anything that could save him. I knew what he would find. Nothing. I had canceled the supplementary card he carried, the one linked to my account. I knew he didn't have a debit card of his own because he never kept enough money in his personal account to avoid the monthly fees. He relied on cash app transfers from Brittany, and Brittany was in a cell. He pulled out a card. He looked at it. He threw it on the ground in frustration. It was useless. Plastic. He patted his pockets, looking for his car keys. He turned toward the spot on the street where the luxury SUV usually sat. The company car, the symbol of his wife's success, the chariot he used to drive to the store to buy chips. It was empty, just a rectangular patch of dry pavement where the rain and snow hadn't hit yet. The tow truck I had seen earlier, the one that took the SUV, it had done its job. The car was gone, sitting in an impound lot on the other side of the city. Darnell didn't have a car, he didn't have a coat, he didn't have shoes. He walked over to the pile of garbage bags, the mountain of black plastic that contained his life. He kicked one. It didn't make him feel better. He sat down on it. The image on my screen was pathetic. A grown man, 35 years old, sitting on a bag of laundry in the snow, hugging his knees, rocking back and forth. I zoomed in on his face. He was crying. I could see the tears tracking through the grime on his face. He was muttering something. I turned up the volume on the iPad. "Pop," he was saying over and over again. "Pop. I am sorry, Pop. Come back." I sat in my warm penthouse 60 stories above him. I took a sip of my whiskey. It didn't taste good anymore. It tasted like ashes. My finger hovered over the button to call the lobby. I could tell the concierge to send a car. I could tell them to bring him here. I could give him a hot shower and a warm bed. It would be so easy. It would stop the pain in my chest, the instinct to protect my child. But then I remembered the soup. I remembered the heat of the broth on my face. I remembered Darnell turning away, putting his headphones on, blocking out my pain because it was inconvenient for him. I remembered him laughing when Brittany called me a leech. If I saved him now, he would learn nothing. He would learn that he could betray me, he could abuse me, and at the end of the day, Daddy would still come to the rescue. He would learn that there are no consequences, only safety nets. And a man who believes in safety nets never learns to fly. He only learns to fall. I pulled my hand back. I didn't make the call. This was the crucible. This was the fire. Darnell had to burn. He had to burn away the entitlement. He had to burn away the weakness. He had to burn away the sterling influence. He had to sit in the snow and realize that he was alone. I watched him for another hour. He tried to use his phone, probably to call me again, but I had blocked him. And eventually, the battery must have died because the blue light went out. He curled up on the bags, trying to burrow into the plastic for warmth. He looked like a homeless man. He looked like a discard. I felt a tear roll down my own cheek. I wiped it away angrily. "This is love," I whispered to the empty room. "This is the hardest kind of love there is." I wasn't abandoning him, I was introducing him to himself. For the first time in his life, Darnell Jefferson was going to have to survive. He was going to have to find a shelter. He was going to have to beg for a meal. He was going to have to feel the eyes of people judging him. He was going to learn what it meant to be a black man in America with nothing in his pockets. I built an empire so he wouldn't have to know that feeling. But by shielding him from it, I had made him weak. I had made him soft. Now the world would harden him, or it would break him. I hoped it would harden him. I prayed it would harden him. I closed the cover of the iPad. The screen went black, cutting off the view of my shivering son. I stood up and walked to the fireplace. The flames were dying down. turning into glowing embers. Tomorrow was going to be a hard day for Darnell. Tomorrow he would wake up stiff and freezing if he slept at all. Tomorrow he would have to figure out how to eat tomorrow. He would have to figure out who he was, and I would be watching, I would be waiting, but I wouldn't be helping. Not yet. The lesson wasn't over. Class was just beginning. I went to bed, but I left the blinds open. I wanted the cold light of the city to remind me of what was happening down below. I wanted to remember that while I slept in silk, my son slept on plastic. It was the price we both had to pay for the truth. The Cook County Jail does not smell like a boardroom. It smells of bleach, stale sweat, and the cold metallic scent of despair. It is a place designed to strip you of your humanity, layer by layer, until there is nothing left but a number and a uniform. I walked through the security checkpoint, my Italian leather shoes clicking against the linoleum floor, a stark contrast to the shuffling of the inmates in their shackles. I was wearing my charcoal suit, the one I wore to close the deal on the downtown high-rise. I wanted her to see it. I wanted her to see the man she had underestimated. The guard buzzed me through the heavy steel door. He looked at me with a mixture of curiosity and respect. He knew who I was. The news had been all over Chicago for 24 hours. The billionaire fry cook, the secret tycoon, the man who took down his own executive. I sat in the visitation booth. The plexiglass barrier was scratched and clouded a dirty window into a world I had fought my whole life to avoid. I placed my hands on the counter and waited. 5 minutes later, the door on the other side opened. Brittany walked in. She was unrecognizable. The power suit was gone, replaced by a baggy, bright orange jumpsuit that washed out her complexion. Her hair, usually a helmet of hairspray and perfection, hung limp and greasy around her face. Her makeup was gone, revealing the dark circles of a sleepless night and the raw fear in her eyes. She wasn't the tiger anymore. She wasn't the shark. She was just a woman who had fallen off the top of the mountain and hit every rock on the way down. She sat down. She picked up the receiver. Her hand was shaking. I could see the tremors from my side of the glass. She looked at me, and for a moment I saw a flash of the old Brittany. The calculation, the assessment. She was looking for a weakness. She was looking for the soft-hearted old man she used to bully. "Dad," she said, her voice tinny through the phone. "Thank God you came. You have to get me out of here. This place, it is a mistake. It is filthy. The women in here, they are animals." I picked up the receiver. I didn't say hello. I just listened. I tried to call Darnell. She continued the words, tumbling out of her mouth in a rush. "But he isn't answering. His phone is dead. And my parents. They said their cards aren't working. Dad, you have to help me." The judge set bail at $500,000. Cash. They said I am a flight risk because of the offshore accounts. Can you believe that, me a flight risk? She let out a nervous, high-pitched laugh that sounded like glass breaking. "I need you to post the bail, Luther. I know you have the money. I saw the accounts. I saw the portfolio. 500,000 is nothing to you. It is pocket change. Just write the check, get me out, and we can fix this. We can sit down with the lawyers and explain that this was all just a big misunderstanding." I leaned forward. "Misunderstanding?" "Yes," she cried, pressing her hand against the glass. "It was the stress, Luther. You don't know what it is like. The pressure of the job, the quarterly targets, the expansion plans. I was drowning. I didn't mean to take the money. I borrowed it. I was going to pay it back with my bonus. And the assault I asked." My voice was calm, devoid of emotion. "Was that a loan too?" She flinched. She looked at the bandage on my forehead. That wasn't me," she whispered. "That was the stress talking." I snapped. "Darnell, he is so lazy, Luther. He does nothing. I have to carry everything. The mortgage, the bills, the image. I came home and I was exhausted, and the soup. It just set me off. I didn't mean to hurt you. I love you, Dad. You know I love you. We are family." Family. There was that word again. The shield they always hid behind when the arrows started flying. I looked at her. I really looked at her. I looked for a shred of genuine remorse. I looked for a tear that wasn't shed for herself. I looked for the woman my son had married. I didn't find her. I only found a narcissist who was sorry she got caught. I sat there for a long moment, letting the silence stretch out between us. I watched her squirm. I watched the hope in her eyes curdle into panic as I didn't reach for my checkbook. "Brittany," I said finally. "Do you know why I am here to bail me out?" she said quickly. "To bring me home." "No," I said. "I am here to tell you a story." She blinked. "A story?" "Dad, we don't have time for stories. I am in jail." When I was 20 years old, I said, ignoring her, I walked into a bank to get a loan for my first food truck. I had a business plan. I had savings. I had a credit score that I had polished like a diamond. The loan officer was a man about your age. White, Ivy League suit. He looked at my application, and then he looked at me. He didn't look at the numbers. He looked at my skin. He looked at my hands. And he tore the application in half. He told me that people like me didn't run businesses. He told me to go apply for a janitor position. Brittany frowned. What does this have to do with me? Everything, I said. Because last night in my kitchen you looked at me with the exact same eyes that man had. You didn't see a father. You didn't see a man. You saw a color you didn't respect and a class you thought you were above. You called me a leech. You told me to cover my face so I wouldn't embarrass you in front of your wealthy parents. You treated me like something you stepped in. I leaned closer to the glass. You hit me, Brittany. You didn't hit me because you were stressed. You didn't hit me because of Darnell. You hit me because the soup had no salt. You hit me because you thought you could. You thought I was powerless. You thought I was nobody. She started to cry now, ugly, heaving sobs. Dad, please. Stop calling me Dad, I snapped. The sharpness of my voice made her jump. You stole $40,000 from my company, I continued. You used my money to buy bags you didn't need and spa treatments you didn't earn. You financed your parents' vacation on my back while you looked me in the eye and told me I was a burden. You laughed at me. You and your mother sat at my table, ate my food, and talked about putting me in a state home to rot. I didn't mean it, she wailed. It was just talk. It wasn't talk, Brittany. It was a plan. I heard you. I heard every word. I took a breath. The air in the room felt thin, but my head was clear. And now, I said, my voice dropping to a whisper that was louder than a scream. Now you want me to pay for your freedom. You want me to take the money I earned, the money you despise, the money you stole, and use it to open this cage. I stood up. The chair scraped against the floor. You want me to bail you out? She nodded frantically, pressing both hands against the glass, leaving greasy smears. Yes, yes, please. I will do anything. I will sign a prenup. I will pay you back every cent. Just get me out. I looked down at her. Not for $1 million, I said. Not for 10 million. Her face fell. Her mouth opened in a silent scream of disbelief. You hit me over a bowl of soup, Brittany. You embezzled my fortune. You looked down on my skin, my history, and my life. You treated me like a dog in the house I bought. And now you want my help? I leaned down so my face was level with hers. Never. The word hung in the air between us, heavy and absolute. Never, I repeated. You are going to stay in this cell. You are going to go to trial. And when the judge asks me for a sentencing recommendation, I am going to tell him to give you the maximum. I am going to spend every dime of that fortune you love so much to make sure you stay exactly where you belong. No, she screamed. You can't. I am family. Darnell will kill you. Darnell loves me. Darnell isn't coming, I said. Darnell is currently sitting on a curb in the snow because I evicted him last night. I took the house back, Brittany. I took the cars. I took the money. Darnell is homeless. He can't help you. He can't even help himself. The realization hit her like a physical blow. She slumped back in her chair, her eyes wide and vacant. The enormity of her loss finally crashed down on her. She had lost her job. She had lost her freedom. She had lost her husband's support. And she had lost the only lifeline she had left. I buttoned my jacket. I adjusted my cuffs. I turned to the door. Wait! She shrieked, pounding on the glass. Wait! Luther! Mr. Jefferson! Please, I am sorry. I am so sorry. Don't leave me here. It smells... It's cold. I can't be here. I am a vice president. I stopped with my hand on the doorknob. I looked back at her one last time. She was clawing at the window, her face twisted in agony. Enjoy the dinner service, Brittany, I said. I opened the door and walked out. I heard her screaming my name as the heavy steel door slammed shut behind me, cutting off the sound. The silence of the hallway rushed back in. I walked down the corridor, past the guards, past the other visitors. I felt lighter. The weight of her abuse, the weight of her judgment, it was gone. I had left it on the other side of the glass. I walked out into the parking lot. Henry was waiting by the car. He opened the door for me. How did it go, sir? He asked. It is done, Henry, I said. It is finished. I got into the back of the Rolls-Royce. I sank into the leather seat. Take me to the office, I said. We have a company to run. As the car pulled away, I looked back at the grim fortress of the jail. Brittany Sterling was going to learn a lot of things in there. She was going to learn about humility. She was going to learn about consequences. But mostly she was going to learn that you never ever bite the hand that feeds you, especially when that hand is attached to a man who knows how to butcher a hog. I closed my eyes. The soup needed salt. But revenge. Revenge was perfect just the way it was. It was 3 days after the eviction. 3 days of silence from the streets, but noise in the boardroom. I was standing in the lobby of the Jefferson Foods Tower, a space that soared 3 stories high with walls of glass and floors of Italian marble. It was a cathedral to capitalism, a monument to what a man can build when he is willing to burn his hands on the stove day after day. I was wearing a gray pinstripe suit today, cut sharp enough to draw blood. I was talking to the head of building security, reviewing the new protocols now that the secret chairman was no longer a secret. The revolving doors spun slowly, pushing the cold Chicago wind out and letting the warm, scented air of the lobby remain undisturbed. People flowed in and out, executives in wool coats, assistants with trays of coffee, clients looking to make a deal. They all nodded to me. They all knew who I was now. The invisible man had become the king of the castle. Then the rhythm of the lobby broke. There was a commotion near the main security desk. A voice raised and cracking cut through the low hum of business conversations. I need to see him. He is my father. You can't stop me. Do you know who I am? I turned slowly. I knew that voice. I had heard it whine for toys, I had heard it beg for car keys, and I had heard it tell me to shut up and cook the soup. It was Darnell. But it wasn't the Darnell who sat on his leather couch playing video games. This was a ghost. He was wearing the same clothes he had been wearing when my security team threw him out into the snow, a thin t-shirt and sweatpants that were now stained with mud and grease. He had found shoes somewhere, old canvas sneakers that looked 3 sizes too big, likely scavenged from a donation bin or a dumpster. His face was gaunt, covered in a patchy stubble that spoke of 3 days without a razor or a mirror. He smelled. Even from 20 feet away, I could smell the sour stench of the streets clinging to him. Sweat, fear, and the unwashed odor of a man who has slept on concrete. The security guards, 2 burly men who didn't know Darnell from Adam, had him blocked. One had a hand on his chest, pushing him back toward the revolving door. Sir, you need to leave, the guard said firmly. This is private property. No soliciting. I am not soliciting, Darnell screamed, his eyes wild and bloodshot. I am Darnell Jefferson. That man over there. That is my dad. Pop, pop, tell them. He saw me. His eyes locked onto mine. For a second there was relief, then confusion. He took in the suit. He took in the gold watch on my wrist. He took in the way the staff was standing around me, deferential and respectful. He looked at the building, really looked at it, realizing for the first time that the name on the sign outside Jefferson Foods wasn't a coincidence. It was a signature. I signaled to the guards. Let him through. The guards hesitated, looking at Darnell's filthy clothes and then at my pristine suit. Sir, are you sure he appears unstable? I am sure, I said. He is family. The guard stepped back. Darnell stumbled forward. He didn't run to hug me. He stopped about 5 feet away, swaying slightly on his feet. He looked around the lobby, his mouth hanging open. He looked at the marble. He looked at the brass fixtures. He looked at the receptionist who was watching him with a mixture of pity and disgust. You, Darnell whispered, his voice raspy. You own this, all of this. I built this, I corrected him. Brick by brick. Darnell shook his head, a hysterical laugh bubbling up in his throat. You are rich. You are filthy rich. And you let us live in that bungalow. You let me worry about car payments. You let Brittany stress about money. I let you live rent-free, I said calmly. I let you drive a car I paid for. I put food on your table every single night. You never worried about a payment in your life, Darnell. I worried for you. But you had millions, he shouted, his voice echoing off the high ceilings. People stopped to watch. Executives paused mid-stride. Darnell didn't care. The entitlement was rising up in him, choking out the shame of his appearance. You had millions and you acted like a cook. You lied to me. You lied to your own son. I protected you, I said, or I tried to. Protected me. Darnell spat on the marble floor. You humiliated me. I am sleeping in a shelter. Pop, I am eating at a soup kitchen. I had to fight a guy for these shoes. And you are here wearing a suit that costs more than my life. He took a step closer. The smell hit me full force now. It was the smell of rock bottom. Why? He asked, tears cutting tracks through the dirt on his face. Why did you hide it? We could have been kings. I could have been a VP. I could have been somebody. You could have been somebody without the money, Darnell, I said. That was the point. Give me some money, he demanded, holding out a shaking hand. It was dirty, the fingernails black with grime. I need cash. Now. I am your son. You owe me. You can't let me live like this while you sit in a tower. I looked at his hand. It was the same hand that had held the controller while his wife threw soup at me. It was the same hand that had waved me away when I was bleeding. I owe you, I asked softly. Yes. You are my father. It is your job to take care of me. My job was to raise a man, I said. I failed. I raised a leech. I stepped closer to him. I didn't back away from the smell. I wanted to be close enough to see the truth in his eyes. You have been standing here for 5 minutes, Darnell, I said. You have yelled at me. You have accused me. You have demanded cash. I pointed to the bandage on my forehead. It was smaller now, but the cut was still healing. The bruise around my eye was fading to a sickly yellow-green. You haven't asked me once how I am, I said. You haven't asked if my eye still hurts. You haven't asked if the burns on my face from the soup have healed. You haven't said, I am sorry my wife beat you. You haven't said, I am sorry I turned my back. Darnell blinked. He looked at the bandage as if seeing it for the first time. That was Brittany, he mumbled. She's crazy. She's in jail. I didn't do it. You watched, I said. You watched, and you told me to make her a sandwich. That is worse than throwing the bowl, Darnell. That is indifference. That is the death of love. I am hungry, Pop, he whined, reverting to the child he always was. I haven't eaten since yesterday. Please, just give me $1,000 or $500, just enough to get a room and some clothes. I'll pay you back, I swear. You will pay me back, I asked. With what? You have no job. You have no skills. You have no character. I am your blood, he screamed. Doesn't that mean anything? It means I am responsible for the fact that you are breathing, I said. It doesn't mean I am responsible for funding your lifestyle. I reached into my pocket. Darnell's eyes lit up. He thought I was going for my wallet. He thought the old game was back on. Daddy was going to fix it. Daddy was going to make the pain go away. I pulled out a handkerchief, a clean white monogrammed handkerchief. I wiped a speck of spittle from my lapel where he had shouted at me. I hid the money, Darnell, because I was afraid of this, I said, putting the handkerchief back. I was afraid that if you knew what I had, you wouldn't see me. You would only see the bank account. I was afraid you would love the wallet and hate the man holding it. I looked him up and down. And I was right. You don't love me. You don't even like me. You just want to consume me. That's not true, he cried. I love you, Pop. Then ask me how I am, I challenged him. Ask me without your hand out. Ask me without looking at my watch. Ask me because you care that your father was assaulted in his own home. Darnell opened his mouth. He closed it. He looked down at his dirty sneakers. He couldn't do it. The words weren't there. The sentiment wasn't there. The hunger in his belly was louder than the love in his heart. I need money, he whispered. Please. There it was, the bottom line. I felt a piece of my heart wither and die. It was the piece that held on to the hope that my son was just misguided. He wasn't misguided. He was broken, and money couldn't fix him. Money would only feed the rot. No, I said. Darnell looked up shocked. What? No money? I said. Not a dime, not a penny. The ATM is out of order, Darnell. Permanently. You are going to let me starve? He asked, his voice rising in disbelief. You are going to let your own son sleep on the street. I am not letting you do anything, I said. You are choosing it. You are 35 years old. You have 2 hands, you have 2 legs, you have a brain somewhere in there. I gestured to the bustling city outside the glass doors. There are millions of people out there who started with less than you have right now. I was one of them. I slept in a bus station when I was 18. I ate out of trash cans. I didn't come crying to my daddy. I got to work. I can't work, Darnell yelled. I am grieving. My life is over. Your vacation is over, I corrected. Your life is just starting, the real life, the one where you have to earn your keep. I turned to the security guards. Gentlemen, I said, Mr. Jefferson is leaving. Pop, no! Darnell grabbed for my sleeve. He left a smudge of grease on the fine wool. You can't do this. I am sorry. I am sorry about the soup. I am sorry about everything. Just help me. I pulled my arm away. I looked at the stain on my jacket. I am helping you, I said coldly. I am teaching you the only lesson that matters. Hunger is the best teacher. I hate you, he screamed as the guards grabbed his arms. I hope you die alone in this tower. I hate you. I know, I said. You hated me when I was cooking your dinner too. At least now it is honest. They dragged him toward the door. He kicked and screamed a tantrum of epic proportions. The people in the lobby watched with wide eyes. They saw a crazy homeless man attacking a CEO. They didn't see a father breaking his own heart to save his son's soul. I watched him go. I watched him get thrown out onto the sidewalk. He landed on his hands and knees. He stayed there for a moment, pounding the concrete with his fists. Then slowly he got up. He looked back at the building. He looked at me through the glass. I didn't look away. I stood my ground. Big Lou wasn't backing down. But inside Luther, the father was weeping. I turned around and walked toward the elevators. I had a meeting. I had a company to run. And I had a son who needed to learn that rock bottom wasn't a place to live. It was a place to build a foundation. But he couldn't build it if I kept pulling him up. I pressed the button for the penthouse. The doors closed, shutting out the sight of the street, shutting out the sight of my son. Get to work, Darnell, I whispered to the empty elevator. Just get to work. I watched him standing there on the sidewalk, shivering in his thin, filthy clothes. The automatic doors of the Jefferson Foods Tower hissed shut behind me, cutting off the conditioned air and the smell of money. Out here on the concrete, it smelled like exhaust fumes and the wet, metallic scent of the city. Darnell was looking at me with eyes that were red-rimmed and hollow eyes that were begging for a rescue but refusing to see the rope I was throwing him. He thought I was leaving. He thought I was done. I wasn't done. I am a father. You are never done. You just changed tactics. I signaled to the head of security, a man named Mike, who had been watching the scene with a stoic expression. Mike nodded and reached behind the security desk just inside the vestibule. He came out holding a bundle of gray fabric. I took it from him. It was rough to the touch, polyester blend, durable, stain-resistant. It was a standard-issue maintenance uniform for the Jefferson Foods janitorial staff. On the pocket there was a patch. It didn't say vice president, it didn't say director, it said trainee. I walked down the steps toward my son. He flinched when I approached, maybe expecting a hit, maybe expecting a hug. I didn't give him either. I held out the uniform. Here, I said. Darnell looked at the gray wad of cloth in my hands. He looked at me. Confusion clouded his face. What is this? He asked, his voice raspy from screaming. A blanket. It is a job. Darnell, I said. He stared at me. He blinked slowly like a man trying to understand a foreign language. A job. Yes, I said. You said you were hungry. You said you needed money. You said you had nothing. Well, I am offering you something. This is a uniform. The shift starts at 6 a.m. tomorrow morning. But since you are here now, and since you look like you need a shower, you can start in the locker room. There are showers there. Soap, hot water. Darnell reached out and touched the fabric. He recoiled as if it were burning him. What kind of job, he whispered. Facilities management, I said. Specifically the ground floor. The lobby needs to be mopped every 2 hours. The glass needs to be Windexed. And the executive washrooms on the first level need to be scrubbed. He took a step back, his face twisting into a mask of absolute horror. It wasn't the horror of a man facing starvation. It was the horror of a man whose ego was being asked to sign a check his pride couldn't cash. You want me to be a janitor? He asked, his voice rising in disbelief. You want me to clean toilets in your building? It is honest work, I said calmly. It pays $15 an hour. That is minimum wage. It is enough to buy a meal. It is enough to save for a room at the YMCA. It comes with a hot meal from the cafeteria once a shift. He looked at the building towering above us. He looked at the executives walking in and out, men and women in suits, people he thought were his peers just a week ago. "Everyone will see me," he hissed. "Brittany's friends, your employees. They will see Darnell Jefferson scrubbing the floor. They will see a man working for his living," I said. "There is no shame in labor, Darnell. I scrubbed floors, I washed dishes, I cleaned grease traps that smelled so bad they made your eyes water. That is how I built this. That is how I bought the diapers you wore. That is how I paid for the video games you played." "No," he shook his head violently. "No. This is a joke. You are mocking me. You are trying to humiliate me. I am trying to feed you." I shouted, my patience finally fraying at the edges. "I am trying to give you a ladder. You are in a hole, boy. You are at the bottom. You can't start at the top when you are at the bottom. You have to climb." I shoved the uniform into his chest. He grabbed it reflexively. "Take it," I said. "Put it on. Show up. Do the work. If you do a good job, if you show up on time, if you clean those floors until they shine, we can talk about a raise in 6 months. We can talk about the mailroom. But today, you are a janitor." He held the uniform. He looked down at the patch that said trainee. I could see the war inside him. His stomach was rumbling. I could hear it from where I stood. His body wanted the food. His body wanted the hot shower. His body wanted to survive. But his pride was a cancer. It had metastasized. It had consumed him. He had spent 3 years living as a fake rich man, and he couldn't let go of the costume. He couldn't admit that he was just a man who needed a job. "I am not a janitor," he whispered, his voice shaking with a toxic mix of shame and arrogance. "I am better than this. I am Darnell Jefferson. I am the son of the chairman." "You are a homeless man with dirty socks," I said brutally. "That is who you are right now. The name doesn't mean a damn thing if you don't have the character to back it up." He looked at me with hatred, pure, unadulterated hatred. It was the look of a child who has been told he can't have ice cream for dinner but magnified by 30 years of entitlement. "I won't do it," he said. He threw the uniform. He didn't just drop it. He balled it up and threw it at my feet. It landed in a puddle of slush and oil near the curb. The gray fabric soaked up the dirty water instantly. "Keep your trash," he spat. "I would rather starve than be your servant. I would rather die than let you laugh at me while I scrub your toilet." I looked at the uniform lying in the mud. I looked at my son. He stood there, chest heaving, chin high, trying to look noble in his filth. He thought he was making a stand. He thought he was preserving his dignity. He didn't realize he was throwing away his life. I felt a coldness settle over me. It wasn't anger anymore. It was the finality of a door closing, a lock clicking shut. I had offered him a hand. It was a rough hand, a hard hand, but it was a hand. He had slapped it away. "Okay, Darnell," I said. My voice was quiet. It barely carried over the traffic noise. I didn't pick up the uniform. I left it there in the mud. "You made your choice," I said. "You want to be a big man? Go be a big man. Go find another way. But do not come back here. Do not call me. Do not stand in my lobby. Because the next time you trespass on my property, I won't come down to talk. I will let the police handle it, and they won't offer you a job. Pop, you can't..." He started his bravado faltering as he saw me turn away. I turned my back on him. I turned my back on my son. It was the hardest physical movement I have ever made. Every muscle in my body wanted to turn around, to grab him, to shake him, to force him to take the job. But I knew it wouldn't work. You can't force a man to eat if he would rather starve than chew. I walked toward the revolving doors. I heard him behind me. "You will be sorry," he screamed. When I get back on top, you are going to beg me to talk to you. I don't need you. I don't need your charity." I walked through the doors. The warm air of the lobby hit me. The smell of expensive coffee and floor wax surrounded me. I walked past the security desk. Mike looked at me. He looked out the glass doors at Darnell, who was still screaming at my back, a lonely figure against the gray city backdrop. "Should I remove the uniform, sir?" Mike asked quietly. "Leave it," I said. "Leave it right there. Let him look at it." I walked to the elevator. I pressed the button for the penthouse. I didn't look back. I couldn't. If I looked back, I might break, and I needed to be unbreakable. Darnell was on his own now. Truly on his own. He had rejected the lesson of labor. Now he had to learn the lesson of hunger. And that was a teacher that didn't grade on a curve. The elevator doors closed. I was alone in the steel box. I leaned my head against the wall and closed my eyes. I prayed for him. It was all I had left to give. I prayed that the cold would wake him up before it killed him. I prayed that the hunger would eat his pride before it ate his body. But I wasn't going to feed him. Not today, not tomorrow. The uniform stayed in the mud, and my son stayed in the street. The gavel came down with a sound like a gunshot cracking the heavy silence of the courtroom. It was the final period at the end of a very long and very ugly sentence. I sat in the back row, my hands resting on my knees, watching the woman who had thrown hot soup in my face just 3 weeks ago. Brittany Sterling stood before the judge, trembling in her orange jumpsuit. The arrogant executive who had strutted into my boardroom was gone. In her place was a terrified woman realizing that her corporate ladder had led straight to a cell. The judge was a stern woman who had no patience for white-collar crime or elder abuse. She looked over her glasses at Brittany and delivered the verdict that would define the next half-decade of my daughter-in-law's life. 5 years in state prison. No probation. No suspended sentence. 5 years of hard time for embezzlement, grand larceny, and felony assault on a senior citizen. Brittany collapsed. She didn't scream this time. She just folded in on herself like a puppet whose strings had been cut. Her lawyer, a public defender, who looked as tired as I felt, just shook his head. There was no appeal to be made. The video evidence I had provided was irrefutable. The financial trail was a highway leading straight to her guilt. But the prison sentence wasn't the only punishment. The court ordered full restitution. Every penny she had stolen from Jefferson Foods had to be paid back. And since she had spent it all on vacations and designer bags, the court looked to her assets. That is where the second domino fell. Roger and Patricia Sterling, the parents who had sneered at my cooking and called me a leech, were sitting in the front row. When the judge ordered the liquidation of assets to pay the restitution, I saw the color drain from Roger's face. They had co-signed on Brittany's loans. They had accepted the stolen money for their trips and their lifestyle. They were complicit financially, if not criminally. The clawback was brutal. To pay the debts their daughter had accrued in their name, and to cover the legal fees that were mounting by the hour, the Sterlings had to sell. They didn't just sell the Mercedes. They sold the house in Lake Forest. The house they bragged about. The house where they thought they were safe from the realities of the world. It went on the market as a distress sale. They got pennies on the dollar. I heard later from Saul Cohen that after the bank took its share and the court took its share, Roger and Patricia were left with enough to rent a 2-bedroom apartment in a neighborhood they wouldn't have driven through with the windows down a month ago. Their country club memberships were revoked. Their social circle evaporated. They were left with nothing but their shame and a daughter in prison. I watched the bailiff lead Brittany away. She looked back once. She didn't look at her parents. She looked at me. There was no hate left in her eyes. Just a hollow, haunting recognition that she had gambled her life on the wrong bet. I walked out of the courthouse. The air was cold, biting my cheeks. I buttoned my coat. Justice had been served for Brittany. But the hardest part of the lesson was happening on the other side of town. Darnell, my son, had spent the last 3 nights sleeping on a park bench wrapped in newspapers and his own pride. But the Chicago winter is a teacher that doesn't tolerate truancy. The temperature dropped to 10 degrees last night. Pride doesn't keep you warm when the wind chill hits 0. He had finally broken. He had gone to the only place left open to him, the Holy Name shelter on State Street. I didn't go inside. I couldn't. If he saw me, he would beg, and if he begged, I might break, and if I broke, he would never learn. So I sat in my car across the street, watching through the tinted windows as the line formed for the evening meal. It was a long line. Men with hollow eyes, wearing coats that didn't fit, shuffling forward for a tray of warm food. And there, in the middle of them, was Darnell. He looked like a shadow of the man who used to sit on my couch. His designer clothes were stained and torn. The sneakers he had fought for were scuffed and wet. He wasn't wearing headphones. He wasn't looking at a phone. He was just looking at the door, waiting for it to open. He was hungry. I could see it in the way he held his stomach. I could see it in the way he watched the steam rising from the vents of the shelter. This wasn't the munchies from a late-night gaming session. This was the deep, gnawing ache of an empty belly that doesn't know when it will be filled again. The line moved. Darnell stepped inside. I imagined him walking up to the serving line. I imagined the volunteer, a kind woman with a hairnet, ladling soup into a plastic bowl. It wouldn't be a roasted chicken consommé with thyme and saffron. It would be a vegetable stew thickened with flour made from whatever donations came in that day. It would be bland, it would be watery, and it would be the best thing he had ever tasted. I thought about the night in the kitchen. I thought about Brittany screaming that the soup had no salt. I thought about Darnell telling me to just cook it right. I wondered if he was thinking about that now. I wondered as he sat at a long metal table surrounded by strangers spooning lukewarm broth into his mouth if he remembered the taste of my cooking. I wondered if he remembered the smell of the roast beef on Sundays. I wondered if he realized that the salt he had demanded back then was actually the sweat of my labor given freely and rejected. He was eating the bread of affliction now. He was sleeping on a cot in a room filled with the sounds of coughing and nightmares. He had no privacy. He had no video games. He had no wife to fight his battles. He had no father to pay his bills. He was just a man with nothing. I watched the shelter doors close for the night. The lights dimmed. I felt a tear slide down my face. It burned just like the soup had burned. This was the bottom. This was the place where the old Darnell had to die so that a new one could be born. He had to learn that a roof is a privilege, not a right. He had to learn that food is a blessing, not a given. He had to learn that the man who cleans the floor is worthy of respect because he is the one keeping the world from falling apart. I wiped my face. I started the engine of the Rolls-Royce. The leather was soft, the heater was warm. The contrast between my comfort and his misery was sharp enough to cut glass. But I drove away. I didn't turn back. I didn't go in and write a check to the shelter director to give him a private room. I didn't leave a bag of cash at the front desk. I let him stay there. I let him feel the scratch of the wool blanket. I let him hear the silence of his own thoughts, because I knew that if I pulled him out now, the lesson would be lost. He would go back to being the man who watched his father bleed. He had to stay in the fire a little longer. He had to be forged. I drove back to the penthouse. The city was beautiful at night, a grid of gold and diamonds. I walked into my empty home. I stood by the window and looked out at the lake. I was alone. My wife was gone. My daughter-in-law was in prison. My son was in a shelter. I had won the war. I had taken back my company. I had reclaimed my dignity. I had destroyed the people who tried to destroy me. But victory is a lonely place. I went to the kitchen. I opened the fridge. I took out the ingredients for soup: carrots, celery, onions, chicken. I started to chop. The rhythm of the knife against the board was soothing. Chop, chop, chop. I put the pot on the stove. I added the water. I added the bones. I stood there stirring the pot, watching the steam rise. I added a pinch of salt. Just a pinch. I tasted it. It was perfect. But there was no one there to eat it. I poured a bowl for myself. I sat at the kitchen island. I ate in silence. Tomorrow I would go back to work. Tomorrow I would run the empire. Tomorrow I would be Big Lou, the chairman, the legend. But tonight I was just a father eating soup, waiting for his son to grow up. Waiting for the day when Darnell would walk through that door, not as a boy demanding a meal, but as a man asking for a recipe. Until then, the kitchen would stay closed, and the shelter would have to be his home. The snow had finally melted in Chicago, leaving behind a city that was gray, wet, and raw spring. In the Midwest is not a gentle awakening. It is a muddy struggle. And for 3 months I had watched that struggle from the window of my penthouse office on the 45th floor. Business was booming. Jefferson Foods was expanding, our stock price was up, and the new marketing team was efficient, honest, and salt-free. But my personal balance sheet was still in the red because my son was still missing. I had not heard from Darnell since the day I threw him out of the lobby, since the day he threw the uniform in the mud. I had kept tabs on him. Of course I am a father, not a monster. I knew he had spent the first week in the shelter. I knew he had tried to sleep in the bus station until security kicked him out. I knew he had sold his watch for $50 to buy food. I knew he was cold. I knew he was hungry, and I knew he was angry, but I also knew he was alive. Every morning, I asked Mike, the head of security, if he had seen him, and every morning Mike shook his head no until a Tuesday in March when the rain was coming down sideways and the wind was whipping off the lake. Mike buzzed my intercom. His voice was different this time, not professional and detached, but quiet, almost hesitant. "Mr. Jefferson, he is here." I spun my chair around. I did not ask who he meant. I pressed the button that activated the hidden screen on my desk, the one that linked to the security cameras in the lobby. There he was. He looked like a ghost of the boy I had raised. He had lost at least 30 pounds. His face was gaunt, the cheekbones sharp enough to cut glass. His skin, which used to be smooth and pampered, was rough and weathered from the wind. He was wearing a coat that was 2 sizes too big, probably a donation from a church, and his shoes were wrapped in duct tape to keep the water out. But he was standing up straight. He was not slouching. He was not leaning against the wall. He was standing in the center of the lobby holding a piece of paper in his hand. I watched him walk up to the front desk. He did not ask for me. He did not ask for the chairman. He did not scream about his rights or his inheritance. He spoke to the receptionist. I zoomed in the camera. I turned up the audio. "I am here to see Mr. Henderson," he said. His voice was raspy deep. It sounded like my voice used to sound when I worked double shifts in the kitchen. "The facilities manager?" the receptionist asked, looking him up and down with a sneer. She saw a homeless man she did not see, the heir to the empire. "Yes," Darnell said. "I was told there might be an opening on the night crew." My heart hammered against my ribs. He was not here for money. He was not here for a handout. He was here for the job, the same job he had spit on 3 months ago. I picked up my phone. I called Henderson immediately. "He is in the lobby," I said. "Mr. Jefferson." Henderson sounded surprised. "Yes, sir," the young man. "Darnell, hire him," I said. "Do not treat him like my son treat him. Treat like a new hire. Minimum wage. Probation period. No special favors. If he is late, fire him. If he steals, fire him. If he complains, fire him." "Understood," Sir Henderson said. "But are you sure?" "I am sure." I said, "Give him the uniform." I watched on the screen as Henderson came down to the lobby. I watched him talk to Darnell. I watched Darnell nod. He did not argue about the wage. He did not argue about the hours. He just took the pen and signed the contract. Then Henderson handed him the bundle of gray fabric, the uniform. Darnell took it. He held it in his hands for a long moment, looking down at the patch that said, "Trainee." 3 months ago, he had thrown it in the mud today. He held it like it was made of silk. He walked toward the locker rooms. I turned off the screen. I sat back in my chair, and I let out a breath I had been holding for 90 days. He had taken the bait. Now, we would see if he could handle the hook. The night shift started at 6 p.m. By 7, the office was empty. The executives had gone home to their families. The lights were dimmed, leaving only the security track lighting and the glow of the exit signs. I stayed. I told Henry to go home. I told him I had work to do. I sat in my darkened office watching the monitors. Darnell came out of the service elevator pushing a yellow mop bucket he was wearing. The uniform. It hung loose on his thin frame, but it was clean. He had shaved. His face was raw from the cheap razor, but his jaw was set. He started in the main lobby. The marble floor stretched out in front of him, acres of white stone scuffed by 1,000 shoes that day. He dipped the mop into the soapy water. He wrung it out. He started to push back and forth, the rhythm of labor, the rhythm of humility. I watched him for hours. He cleaned the glass doors, wiping away the fingerprints of men who made more in an hour than he would make in a month. He emptied the trash cans, hauling the heavy bags to the loading dock, the same dock where he had stood shivering in his socks. He did not stop. He did not check his phone. He did not take a break. Around 2 in the morning, he moved to the executive washroom on the first floor. I switched cameras. He was scrubbing the sink, scrubbing the porcelain until it gleamed. He looked at himself in the mirror. He stopped. He leaned closer to the glass, touching his face, touching the lines that worry and hunger had etched there. Then he crumpled. It wasn't a loud breakdown. He didn't scream. He just slid down the wall until he was sitting on the cold tile floor. He pulled his knees to his chest, and he buried his face in his hands. I watched his shoulders shake. I watched him weep. This was the moment. This was the breaking point. This was where he would either quit, walk out the door, and go back to finding an easy way, or he would stand up. My hand hovered over the phone. I wanted to call down. I wanted to tell him it was okay. I wanted to tell him. He had proven enough, but I didn't. I remembered the soup. I remembered the disrespect. I remembered the man who thought he was too good to work. He needed to cry. He needed to mourn the boy he used to be. That boy was dying on the bathroom floor, and a man was being born in. The tears I watched for 10 minutes. He cried until he was empty. Then slowly he lifted his head. He wiped his face with his sleeve. He took a deep breath. He stood up. He walked over to the sink. He He splashed cold water on his face. He looked in the mirror again. His eyes were red, but his chin was up. He picked up the scrub brush. He went back to the toilet. He finished the job. I leaned back in my chair, tears streaming down my own face, silent tears in the dark office. He didn't quit. My son was scrubbing a toilet for $15 an hour, and I had never been prouder of him in my life when he was driving the luxury car. I felt nothing but worry when he was living in the penthouse. I felt nothing but shame. But watching him now, sweating, working, fighting through his own ego, I felt pride. He was building something, not a fortune, not a reputation. He was building character, and character is the only thing you can take with you when the money burns. I watched him finish his shift at 4 a.m. He returned the mop bucket he signed out on the timesheet. He walked out the service door into the cold morning air. He didn't have a car. He walked toward the bus stop. I could have sent the Rolls-Royce. I could have given him a ride. But he needed to walk. He needed to feel the pavement under his feet. He needed to know that he had earned his rest. I stood up. I walked to the window. I watched the small gray figure of my son walking down the empty street. He was limping a little. His feet were probably blistered. His back was probably screaming. But he was walking tall. I went to the small kitchenette in my office. I opened the fridge. I took out a container of soup, chicken consommé, perfectly clear, perfectly seasoned. I heated it up in the microwave. I sat at my desk and I ate it. It tasted like victory. Darnell was back. He wasn't all the way back yet. He had a long road ahead of him. He had months of mopping, years of proving himself. But he had taken the first step. And I would be here waiting, watching, guarding the door until he was ready to walk through it. Not as a prince, but as a king. I finished the soup. I washed the bowl. I dried it. Tomorrow I would have to be the chairman again. I would have to be tough. I would have to ignore him in the hallways. I would have to let him be invisible. But tonight, I was just a father who knew his son was going to be okay. Because a man who can scrub a floor with tears in his eyes and not quit is a man who can build a world. I turned off the monitors. The screen went black, leaving me in the darkness. I slept in my office that night on the leather couch. I didn't want to go home to the empty penthouse. I wanted to be close to the work. I wanted to be close to him, my son, the janitor, my son, the man. The view from the 45th floor of the Jefferson Foods Tower is spectacular. You can see the entirety of Chicago, the steel gray of the lake, the grit of the streets, the ants crawling along the pavement who think they are people. It is a view that costs millions of dollars. It is a view that people kill for. Brittany Sterling had destroyed her life just to get a glimpse of it. But after 2 weeks of sitting in that leather chair signing purchase orders and listening to Arthur drone on about quarterly projections, I realized something. The air up there is thin. It is recycled. It is sterile. It smells of toner ink and ambition, and it leaves a metallic taste in your mouth. I was the chairman. I was the boss. I had won the war. But I was bored out of my mind. I am a man who speaks the language of heat and iron. I speak in the hiss of a searing steak and the bubble of a stockpot. Sitting in a climate-controlled box wasn't living. It was waiting to die. So on a Tuesday morning, I called Arthur into my office. I told him he was in charge of the spreadsheets. I told him not to call me unless the building was on fire or the stock price dropped 10 points. "Where are you going, sir?" Arthur asked, looking panicked. "Are you retiring again?" "No, Arthur," I said, adjusting my cufflinks. "I am going back to work. Real work. I left the tower. I left the Rolls-Royce in the garage. I took the train down to the south side, back to the neighborhood where I started in 1982. It had changed, but it hadn't changed enough. The streets were still cracked. The storefronts were still boarded up. The people still walked with their heads down, carrying the weight of the world on their shoulders. I found a place on 79th Street. It used to be a rib joint, but it had been closed for 5 years. The windows were broken. The sign was hanging by a single rusty bolt. It looked like a ruin. I bought it. Cash. I didn't hire a contractor. I hired a few guys from the neighborhood men who were standing on the corner looking for day labor. We gutted it. We scrubbed 40 years of grease off the walls. We installed a new stove, a 6-burner wolf range that cost more than the building itself. I brought in my own pots, my own knives, my own seasoned cast-iron skillets. I named it Big Lou's Kitchen. No franchise branding, no corporate logos, just hand-painted letters on the glass. And I didn't put prices on the menu. There was a sign by the door written in my own handwriting. "Eat what you need, pay what you can. If you can't pay, wash a dish." My first day opened the line wrapped around the block. They didn't come because I was a millionaire. They didn't know about the tower downtown. They didn't know about the Bentley or the penthouse. To them, I was just the old man in the white apron who knew how to cook. I stood over the stove for 12 hours straight. My back ached. My feet swelled. The heat was suffocating. Sweat ran down my face, stinging the cut above my eye that was finally healing into a thin white scar. And I had never been happier. I made soup. Real soup. Not the delicate consommé I had tried to serve Brittany. I made a heavy, hearty vegetable beef stew. I threw in shank bones to deepen the broth. I added potatoes, carrots, onions, celery, and I seasoned it. I added salt. I added pepper. I added a pinch of cayenne to wake up the spirit. I watched the people come in. There was Mrs. Higgins, a widow who lived on a fixed income and usually ate cat food at the end of the month. I gave her a bowl of stew and a piece of cornbread. She ate it with her eyes closed, humming softly. There was a young mother with 2 kids, looking exhausted and scared. I gave them a table in the back. I brought them extra biscuits. The kids ate like they hadn't seen a hot meal in days. There were men in work boots tired from the construction site. There were men in tattered coats tired from life. I fed them all. I didn't sit in a boardroom listening to lies. I walked the floor. I shook hands. I poured coffee. I listened to stories about bad landlords and sick relatives and the struggle to keep the lights on. These were real problems. These were real people. One afternoon, a man came in. He was wearing a suit that had seen better days, shiny at the elbows. He looked at the menu board, then he looked at his wallet. He hesitated. I walked over to him. "Table for one?" I asked. I am just looking," he stammered. "I don't have much cash on me today." "The sign says pay what you can," I said. "Do you have an appetite?" "Yes," he whispered. "Then you have enough currency," I said. "Sit down." I brought him the special. Smothered pork chops, collard greens, and black-eyed peas. He ate it slowly, savoring every bite. When he was done, he came up to the counter. He put a crumpled $5 bill in the jar. "Thank you," he said. "That is the best meal I have had in years. You could charge $50 for that downtown." I smiled. "I know," I said, "but downtown doesn't need pork chops. Downtown needs a conscience. You keep your $5 son, use it for the bus." He looked at me, tears welling in his eyes. "Who are you?" he asked. "Why are you doing this?" "I am just a cook," I said. "And I am doing this because I can." That was the truth. For the first time in my life, my money wasn't a scoreboard. It was a tool. It was a way to balance the scales. I had spent years accumulating wealth, hoarding it, protecting it from people like Brittany. But money is like manure. If you pile it up, it stinks. If you spread it around, it helps things grow. I felt a connection here that I never felt in the penthouse. When I walked down the street, people waved. Not because they wanted a job, but because I had fed them. I was part of the fabric of the block. I was Big Lou again. One evening after we closed, I sat in the back booth counting the till. There wasn't much money. Most people paid in gratitude. But the jar was full of coins and small bills, honest money earned by honest people. It felt heavier, more substantial than the millions in my investment account. Henry, my driver, walked in through the back door. He had traded his chauffeur's cap for a baseball hat, coming to help me mop up. He didn't drive me here. I took the bus now. It kept me grounded. "You look tired, boss," Henry said, flipping the sign to closed. "I am tired, Henry," I said, rubbing my shoulder. "But it is a good tired. It is the kind of tired that lets you sleep." "I checked on the boy," Henry said quietly. I stopped counting the quarters. I didn't look up. "And he is still at the tower," Henry said. "He has been there 3 months now. He hasn't missed a shift. The security chief says he is the first one in and the last one out. He has lost weight. He looks rough, but he is working." I nodded. A lump formed in my throat. "Does he ask about me?" "No," Henry said. "He asks about the job. He asks if he can pick up overtime. He is keeping his head down." "Good," I said. "That is good." I thought about Darnell scrubbing those marble floors. I thought about him looking at his reflection in the polished stone, seeing the man he was becoming. It was a hard road. It was a lonely road, but it was the only road that led home. "He is living at the YMCA," Henry added. "He rents a room by the week. He pays for it with his paycheck." I closed my eyes. My son, paying his own rent. It was a small thing, a basic thing for most men, but for Darnell, it was a mountain he had climbed. "Leave him be," I said. "He isn't ready yet." "You are tough, Mr. Jefferson," Henry said, leaning on the mop. "Tougher than a $2 steak." "I have to be, Henry," I said. "The world is tough. If I am soft, the world will eat him alive. I already let him get chewed on for too long." I stood up. I walked to the kitchen. I looked at the pot soaking in the sink. I looked at the stainless steel prep table scarred with knife marks. This was my church. This was my sanctuary. In the boardroom, everyone wanted to be the smartest person. Everyone wanted to be the killer. Here, people just wanted to be full. It was simple. It was honest. I picked up a ladle. I tapped it against the side of a pot. It rang like a bell. I thought about Brittany sitting in her cell. I wondered if she was hungry. I wondered if she missed the salt. I didn't feel hate anymore. I just felt a distant pity. She had chased the shiny thing so hard she ran right off a cliff. I thought about Darnell wringing out a mop 3 miles away. He was chasing something too now. He was chasing his own dignity. And I was here in the middle, stirring the pot, keeping the fire lit. I was happy. For the first time since Sarah died, I was truly happy. I wasn't defined by my net worth. I wasn't defined by my title. I was defined by the soup. And the soup was good. I took off my apron. I hung it on the hook by the door. "Lock up Henry," I said. "We have to be back at 5 a.m. Tomorrow is meatloaf day, and you know the neighborhood loves my meatloaf." "Yes, sir." Henry smiled. "Best in the city." I walked out into the cool night air. The streetlights were flickering. A siren wailed in the distance. It wasn't a perfect world. It was messy. It was loud. It was struggling. But it was mine. And I wouldn't trade it for all the boardrooms in Chicago. It has been exactly 1 year since the day the bowl shattered on my kitchen floor. 1 year since the silence in my house was broken by the sound of my own heart cracking open. Winter has returned to Chicago. The wind is whipping off the lake again, coating the sidewalks in ice and turning the breath of the city into white plumes of smoke. But inside Big Lou's kitchen on 79th Street, the air is warm and it smells of rosemary, garlic, and redemption. I was wiping down the counter, watching the last customer leave a young man who works construction down the block. He waved at me with a tired smile, and I waved back. I flipped the sign on the door to closed, but I did not lock it. Not yet. I was expecting one final guest. I went back to the stove. The pot was simmering just like it had been 365 days ago. Chicken consommé clear as liquid gold, rich with the essence of roasted bones and patience. I had spent the afternoon skimming it, watching the impurities rise to the surface and removing them until only the pure broth remained. It is a lot like raising a child. I suppose you have to skim away the ego, the entitlement, the bad influences until you find the character underneath. I checked my watch. It was 7 p.m. right on time. The back door opened, bringing a gust of cold air into the kitchen. I did not turn around immediately. I kept stirring. I wanted to listen to his footsteps. They were heavy, steady, the footsteps of a man who spends his day on his feet, not the shuffling slide of a boy in slippers. Darnell walked into the light of the kitchen. He stopped by the prep table. He did not say anything for a moment. He just stood there, breathing in the smell of the soup. I turned around and looked at my son. He looked different. He looked older in the face, but younger in the eyes. The bloat of easy living was gone, replaced by the lean hardness of labor. His hands were rough, the knuckles swollen from moving boxes and gripping pallet jacks. He was wearing a flannel shirt and work boots that were scuffed but polished. He looked like me 40 years ago. "Hello, Pop," he said. His voice was quiet, respectful. "Hello, Darnell," I said. He stood there, shifting his weight. He looked at the pot on the stove. Then he looked at me. He saw the faint white scar above my eyebrow, the souvenir of his wife's diamond ring. He did not look away. He did not flinch. He owned the sight of it. "I heard you got a promotion," I said, turning back to the ladles. Darnell nodded. "Yes, sir. Warehouse manager. For the night shift. I run the loading dock now, logistics inventory, scheduling. It is a lot of paperwork, but I like it." I smiled internally. Warehouse manager. It was not vice president. It was not a corner office in the tower. But it was real. It was honest. It meant he was responsible for men. He was responsible for millions of dollars of product, and he had earned it, one mop bucket at a time. "I heard you are good at it." I said. "Henderson tells me the dock has not run this smooth in years. He says you caught a shipping error last week that would have cost us 10 grand. Darnell shrugged, a hint of a smile touching his lips. Just doing the job. Pop checking the manifests. Making sure the count is right. You taught me that. Details matter. I did. I said details matter. I reached into the cupboard and pulled out 2 bowls. Not the fine china from the bungalow. Those were gone, sold, or broken. These were thick white ceramic bowls, the kind you find in a diner, the kind that hold heat. I ladled the soup into the bowls. The steam rose up, curling between us. I placed a spoon in each one. Sit down, I said, pointing to the small table in the corner of the kitchen, the same table where I ate my lunch every day. Darnell sat. He took off his coat, folding it neatly over the back of the chair. He washed his hands at the sink, scrubbing them with the industrial soap. He sat down opposite me. I placed the bowl in front of him. Chicken consommé, I said. Darnell looked at the soup, the clear golden liquid, the perfect dice of carrots, and celery resting at the bottom. He went still. He knew what this was. He knew. The last time I had served this dish, it had ended in blood and screaming. He looked at me, his eyes searching my face for a sign of mockery, for a sign of anger. Was I rubbing his nose in it? Was I testing him? He saw only a father waiting to share a meal. He picked up his spoon. His hand trembled slightly. Just a little tremor of memory. He dipped the spoon into the broth. He lifted it to his lips. He blew on it gently. He tasted it. I watched him. I watched the flavor hit his tongue, the richness, the warmth, the love that I had poured into that pot for 3 days. He closed his eyes. He swallowed. Then he put the spoon down. He put his hands on the table and he lowered his head. His shoulders started to shake. I didn't say anything. I just ate my soup. I let him have his moment. When he looked up, his face was wet. Tears were running down his cheeks, dripping onto the table. But he wasn't sobbing like a child. He was crying, like a man who has carried a heavy weight for a long time and finally set it down. "It is good, Pop," he whispered, his voice thick with emotion. "It is really good. It is seasoned properly," I said quietly. He nodded, wiping his eyes. "It is perfect." He took a breath. He looked at me, and for the first time in his life, I saw the man I always hoped was in there. "I am sorry." He said it wasn't a beg. It wasn't a plea for money. It was a statement of fact. "I am sorry for everything, Pop. I am sorry for the soup. I am sorry for Brittany. I am sorry. I let her treat you like that. I am sorry I treated you like that. I was weak. I was stupid, and I was ungrateful." I put down my spoon. "You were lost. Darnell," I said. "You were asleep." "I am awake now," he said. "I promise you I am awake. I know what $1 costs. Now I know what it feels like to be tired. I know what it feels like to be invisible." I nodded. "I know, son. I watched you." He looked at me, surprised. "You watched me." "Every day," I said, "I watched you scrub the floors. Watched you take out the trash. I watched you walk to the bus stop in the rain. I watched you become a man." He looked down at his hands, his scarred, working hands. "I hated you for a while," he admitted. "I hated you when I was in the shelter. I hated you when I was cleaning toilets. I thought you were cruel, and now I asked." Now he looked up, his eyes clear. "Now, I think you saved my life. If you hadn't thrown me out, if you hadn't cut me off, I would still be sitting on that couch waiting to die. I would have gone to prison with Brittany, or I would have ended up like her parents, bitter and broke." I reached across the table and covered his hand with mine. His skin was rough like mine used to be. It felt good. It felt strong. "You saved your own life." "Darnell," I said. I just took away the cushion. We finished the soup in silence. It was a comfortable silence, a silence filled with understanding. We ate the bread, we drank the water. It was the best meal I had eaten in a year, when the bowls were empty. Darnell stood up. He picked up my bowl. "I will wash these," he said. He went to the sink. He rolled up his sleeves. He washed the dishes. He dried them. He put them away. He didn't ask where they went. He figured it out. When he was done, he put on his coat. "Well," he said, "I should get going. I have a shift at 10, inventory night." I stood up. "Darnell, wait." He stopped his hand on the doorknob. "Yes, Pop." I walked over to him. I looked him in the eye. "I am proud of you," I said. He froze. He looked at me and his chin trembled. He bit his lip, trying to hold it together. "Thank you, Pop. That means..." That means everything. I reached into my apron pocket. I pulled out a set of keys, not car keys, not house keys, keys to a building. I held them out. Darnell looked at them, confusion clouding his face. What is this? I bought a building, I said, down the street next to the old hardware store. It used to be a bakery. It has been closed for years. It needs work. It needs a new roof, new plumbing, new wiring. It is a mess. Darnell looked at the keys, then at me. Why are you giving me this? I am not giving it to you, I said. I am hiring you. Hiring me, he asked. To do what? To clean it, to manage it. I said, to build it. I am opening a second location. Big Lou's Kitchen, South. And I need a manager, not a floor manager, not a janitor, a general manager, someone who can handle the contractors, someone who can handle the permits, someone who knows how to work hard and count every dime. Darnell stared at me, his mouth open. You want me to run a restaurant. I want you to build one. I corrected. You are going to oversee the renovation. You are going to hire the staff. You are going to set up the supply chain. You are going to learn the business from the studs up. I am not giving you a penny of profit until the doors open and the registers ring. Green, you keep your job at the warehouse. You work this project on your days off, and in the mornings you sweat for it, Darnell. He looked at the keys in my hand. He looked at the responsibility I was offering him. It wasn't a handout. It was a burden. It was a test. It was a future. You think I can do it? He whispered. I know you can. I said, because you are a Jefferson. And Jeffersons build things. He reached out. He took the keys. His hand closed around the metal tight. I won't let you down, Pop, he said, his voice fierce. I swear. I know, I said. He put the keys in his pocket. He straightened his spine. He looked 2 inches taller than he had when he walked in. I have to go, he said. Can't be late for my shift. Go, I said. Get to work. He opened the door. He walked out into the cold winter night. He didn't look back. He walked with purpose. He walked with pride. I stood in the doorway watching him go. I didn't offer him a ride. I didn't offer him money. I offered him a legacy. And for the first time in his life, he was ready to carry it. I closed the door. I locked it. I went back to the kitchen. I looked at the empty pot of soup. It needed nothing. It was perfect. I turned off the lights. Big Lou was retiring for the night, but Darnell Jefferson was just getting started. And that was the sweetest dessert I could ever ask for. The sound of a hammer striking wood echoed through the quiet Sunday morning air in the south side of Chicago. It was a solid, rhythmic sound. Bang, bang, bang. A sound of construction, not destruction. I sat on the front porch of the brick bungalow, the same porch where I used to sit and worry about my son's future, drinking a cup of coffee that tasted like peace. The man swinging the hammer was Darnell. He was wearing a tool belt that hung low on his hips and a t-shirt stained with sweat and sawdust. He wasn't playing video games. He wasn't complaining about the heat. He was replacing the rotting planks of the picket fence, measuring twice, cutting once, driving the nails home with a focus I hadn't seen in him since he was a boy building Lego castles. He had been working on the house for the last 6 months. He was renting it from the trust now. He paid market rate. Every first of the month, a check arrived at Saul Cohen's office, drawn from Darnell's own bank account, earned with his own labor at the warehouse and the construction site of the new restaurant. He didn't ask for a discount. He didn't ask for a grace period. He paid what he owed. I watched him wipe his forehead with the back of his glove. He looked tired. His eyes had the heavy look of a man who works double shifts. But he also looked strong. The softness was gone from his face, replaced by the sharp angles of discipline. He looked like a Jefferson. Henry, my driver and old friend, stepped onto the porch carrying a small stack of mail. He didn't wear his chauffeur cap on Sundays. He sat down in the rocking chair next to me. Mail call, Henry said softly. He handed me the stack, utility bill, advertisement, a postcard from Arthur who was vacationing in the Hamptons, and a white envelope with a prison stamp in the corner. Statesville Correctional Center. Inmate number 89402. Brittany Sterling. I looked at the envelope. It was the 5th one this month. The handwriting was jagged, desperate. I knew what was inside without opening it. I knew the script. She would start with apologies. She would blame the stress. Then she would blame her parents. Then she would pivot to Darnell asking if he missed her, asking if there was any money left in the accounts she could use for the commissary. She would beg for a visit. She would beg for a lawyer. She would beg for the salt she threw in my face. I didn't feel anger anymore. I didn't feel satisfaction. I just felt a profound, quiet indifference. She was a ghost. a memory of a bad season that had finally passed. I stood up and walked over to the charcoal grill I had set up on the lawn for our Sunday dinner. The coals were hot, glowing orange and gray. I didn't open the letter. I tossed it onto the coals. The paper curled, turned brown, and then burst into a small yellow flame. It burned quickly, turning to ash in seconds. The smoke rose up and disappeared into the blue sky. Pop Darnell called out. He had stopped hammering. He was looking at the grill. I turned to him. "Yeah, son." "Was that from her?" he asked. He didn't say her name. He hadn't said her name in a year. I nodded. It was. Darnell looked at the ashes. He didn't look sad. He didn't look longing. He just nodded a sharp, decisive movement. "Good," he said. "Don't let the smoke get in the meat." He turned back to the fence. He pulled a nail from his belt. He set it against the wood. Bang! I smiled. It was a small smile, but it went deep. He wasn't looking back. He was building a wall against the past, plank by plank. I went back to my chair. I watched him work for another hour. The sun got higher. The neighborhood woke up. Mrs. Higgins walked by with her dog and waved. "Big Lou," she called out. "When is the new place opening?" 2 weeks. "Mrs. Higgins," I shouted back, "you are on the VIP list for the meatloaf." She laughed and kept walking. I looked at Darnell. He was measuring a crossbeam. "You know," I said, raising my voice over the sound of the wind, "you missed a spot on the primer over there." Darnell looked at the spot. He frowned. He picked up the brush. "I am on it, Pop," he said. "It has to be perfect." "Why?" I asked. "It is just a fence, because it is my house," he said. "Well, I am renting it, but I am going to buy it. Saul told me the price. I have the down payment saved. Another 6 months of warehouse shifts and I can sign the papers. I want it to be perfect when I sign my name on the deed." I felt a lump in my throat. He wasn't asking me to give it to him. He was telling me his plan to earn it. "That is a good plan, son," I said. He put down the brush. He walked over to the porch. He sat on the steps wiping his hands on a rag. "Pop," he said, looking out at the street. "Do you remember the soup?" I looked at him. I touched the faint white scar above my eyebrow. "I do. I think about it every day," he said quietly. "I think about how I sat there, how I let her scream at you, how I just wanted to eat my dinner." He looked up at me. His eyes were wet. "I was a coward, Pop. I was a weak, pathetic man." "You were," I agreed. I wasn't going to lie to him. Truth is the only foundation that holds weight. "But you aren't. Anymore," I added. He shook his head. "I am trying. Every day I am trying. When I am tired, when my back hurts, when I want to quit. I remember that soup. I remember the taste of it. And I remember that you made it for me, even though I didn't deserve it. You deserve it now," I said. I stood up. I walked over to the cooler. I pulled out 2 bottles of root beer. I cracked them open. I handed one to him. "Here," I said. "Take a break. The fence isn't going anywhere." He took the bottle. Our fingers brushed. His hands were as rough as mine now. "Thanks, Pop." We sat there in silence, drinking the cold soda, watching the traffic go by. It was a simple moment. It cost nothing. But it was worth more than the penthouse, the Rolls-Royce, and the entire Jefferson Foods Corporation combined. Money can buy a house. It can buy a car. It can buy a suit that makes you look like a king. But money cannot buy the look in a son's eye when he knows he has earned his father's respect. Money cannot buy the peace of a clean conscience. Money cannot buy the flavor of a meal cooked with love and eaten with gratitude. I had spent years hiding my wealth to protect him, but I had ended up hiding myself. I had hidden the struggle. I had hidden the cost. By showing him the money, I almost lost him. But by showing him the work, I got him back. The new restaurant, Big Lou's South, was going to be his. Not as a gift, as a responsibility. He knew the margins. He knew the suppliers. He knew how to fix the compressor when it broke down at 3 a.m. He was ready. And I was ready to retire. For real this time. I was going to sit on this porch. I was going to fish. I was going to advise. But I wasn't going to carry him anymore. He could carry himself. I looked at the scar on my hand, a burn from a grease fire in '82. Then I looked at the scar on his thumb, a hammer strike from last week. We were the same men now, different generations, same steel. Brittany was in a cell, blaming the world for her fate. Her parents were in a rented apartment, drowning in their own bitterness. They were trapped in the prison of their own entitlement. But Darnell was free. He was tired, he was sore, and he was broke compared to what he used to be. But he was free. I finished my root beer. I stood up. "Lunch is in an hour," I said. "I am making chili," Spicy Darnell asked, smiling. "Spicy enough to wake the dead," I said. "And salty enough to remind you who is cooking." He laughed. It was a deep, honest laugh. "I will wash up," he said. I walked back into the house. I went to the kitchen. I started chopping peppers. The cycle was broken. The curse of the easy life was lifted. I wasn't just a rich man anymore. I was a father who had done his job. I had raised a man. It took me 73 years and a lot of heartache, but I did it. And that, I thought as I tossed the peppers into the sizzling pan, is the only legacy that matters. Respect is the seasoning of life. Without it, every relationship is tasteless and cold. I spent years hiding my success to protect my son from greed, only to realize that my silence enabled his weakness. A parent's greatest duty isn't to provide endless comfort, but to teach the strength of character. When they raised their hands against me, they broke the bond of blood. I didn't destroy them. I simply let them face the consequences of their own cruelty. Sometimes you have to let your children hit rock bottom so they can finally learn how to stand on solid ground. If you enjoyed this story of justice, redemption, and the hard road to respect, please hit that like button. It helps the channel more than you know. And if you want to hear more stories about people getting exactly what they deserve, make sure you subscribe and turn on notifications. Let me know in the comments, do you think Darnell deserved a second chance? Or should I have left him in the street? I read every single comment. Until next time, remember, the soup always tastes better when you earn it. Peace.